Julian Moretti owned New York's underworld but couldn't keep a girlfriend. 9 women ran in 4 months, all terrified of the Butcher of Brooklyn. Then a dancer from Detroit with blood on her hands looked at his darkness and didn't flinch. The champagne glass exploded against the bedroom wall. Isabella was already running designer heels, clicking panic-fast toward the elevator. Prada bag clutched like a shield. Her fingers hammered the button. Once, twice, 3 times. "I can't," she gasped, mascara streaking down her face. "I can't sleep next to the Butcher of Brooklyn. My father showed me the file, the bodies, the crime scenes. Everything. God, Julian, I'm so sorry, but I have to go. Right now." The elevator doors opened. She disappeared inside without looking back. Silence crashed through the penthouse like a bomb. Julian Moretti stood alone in 3,200 square feet of luxury that felt like a tomb. 34 years old. Controlled 70% of New York's underground. Couldn't keep one woman past the moment she Googled his name. 9 rejections in 4 months. 9 different women. Same terror in their eyes when they learned what Moretti really meant. When concerned fathers delivered folders full of crime scene photos. When they realized the rumors about disappeared witnesses and bodies that never surfaced weren't exaggerations, they were understatements. He walked to the floor-to-ceiling windows. Manhattan glittered 30 stories below, 8 million people living lives that would never intersect with his darkness. His father's voice echoed from the grave. "Fear keeps you safe. Love makes you weak." Julian had fear, had safety, had an empire built on blood and brutality. Love was impossible. His phone buzzed. Enzo, his underboss. "Boss, stop drowning alone. 1 hour. There's a place in Harlem, someone you need to see." "I'm done trying, Enzo. 1 hour. Then we handle Petrov. Trust me on this." Julian went because sitting in that empty penthouse was worse than hope. He drove to the Obsidian Lounge, rebuilding his walls, locking away the hurt. By the time he walked through those doors, he'd transformed back into the Butcher, feared, untouchable, expecting nothing. Inside, a woman named Simone was stretching before her performance. She'd killed a man at 17 with a tire iron. She knew exactly what monsters looked like, and when she saw Julian Moretti, she didn't run. She smiled. The ride to Harlem took 23 minutes. Julian spent every second reconstructing the armor he wore in public. Block by block, the broken man in the empty penthouse disappeared. In his place emerged the Butcher of Brooklyn, the version of himself that made grown men lower their eyes and politicians return his calls immediately. His driver, Tommy, knew better than to speak. The silence in the back of the Escalade was thick, suffocating, the kind of quiet that preceded violence. Julian stared out the tinted windows, watching the city transform from the gleaming towers of Midtown to the grittier streets of Upper Manhattan, then into Harlem where old brownstones stood shoulder to shoulder with new developments. The Obsidian Lounge occupied a corner building that looked unremarkable from the outside. No neon signs screaming for attention. No velvet ropes or crowds of people waiting to get in. Just a plain black door with a small brass plaque that read the name in elegant script. Julian stepped out of the car, his security detail materializing from the second vehicle that always followed 10 car lengths behind. 3 men in dark suits, faces forgettable, hands trained to reach for weapons hidden under expensive fabric. They moved like shadows, taking positions that offered clear sightlines and quick access. "Wait here," Julian said. The lead guard, a man named Dominic, who'd taken a bullet for Julian's father 20 years ago, hesitated. "Boss," I said, "wait." Dominic's jaw tightened, but he nodded. Julian Moretti didn't give orders twice, and everyone in his organization knew it. The interior of the Obsidian Lounge defied every expectation Julian had built during the drive. No cheap glitter or desperate glamour. Instead, dark wood panels absorbed the low lighting. Velvet curtains in deep burgundy framed a stage that looked more suited for theater than exotic dancing, and the furniture was the kind of quality that whispered old money rather than screaming new wealth. The clientele matched the atmosphere. Julian's trained eye cataloged them instantly. A senator he recognized from news coverage. 2 professional athletes whose faces graced sports networks. A tech CEO who'd just taken his company public for billions. These weren't men looking for a cheap thrill. These were men who had everything to lose and came here anyway. Enzo stood near a corner booth, his stocky frame relaxed but his eyes alert. When he saw Julian, something like relief crossed his face. "Boss." Enzo gripped his hand, pulled him into a brief embrace. "Glad you came. You have 30 minutes to make this worth my time." Julian slid into the booth, accepting the bourbon Enzo pushed across the table. "Then I'm handling Petrov. Just watch." Enzo nodded toward the stage. 5 minutes. That's all I'm asking. Julian wanted to argue, wanted to leave, wanted to go back to his penthouse and let the emptiness swallow him whole, because at least emptiness was predictable. But he'd driven all the way to Harlem, and some part of him, the part still capable of hoping despite 9 brutal lessons otherwise needed to see what Enzo thought was so important. The lights dimmed. Conversation throughout the lounge dropped to whispers, then silence. A piano started playing. Not recorded music pumped through speakers, but live a woman at a grand piano in the shadows playing something slow and haunting that Julian's mother would have recognized. Nina Simone, maybe, or Billie Holiday. Something that carried weight and history and pain. Then the spotlight hit the stage, and Julian forgot how to breathe. The woman who emerged moved like poetry written in muscle and bone. Her skin was dark, not the ambiguous tan that magazines loved, but the deep, rich brown that spoke of African roots worn proudly. The stage lights caught her in profile first, illuminating the sharp line of her jaw, the elegant column of her neck, the way her hair was pulled back severe and unforgiving. But it was her face that stopped Julian's heart. Even from 30 feet away, even through the calculated performance lighting, he could see it. The same expression he saw in his own mirror every morning, the look of someone who'd survived by becoming harder than whatever tried to break them, the eyes of a person who'd stared into darkness and decided to stare back instead of blinking. She moved across the stage with aggressive precision. Every step, every turn, every extension of her limbs was controlled to the point of violence. This wasn't a performance designed to seduce. This was a declaration of war against anyone who thought they could touch her without permission, own her without consent, dismiss her without consequence. The music swelled, and she moved with it up the pole, with strength that made the professional athletes in the audience sit forward in their seats, inverting her body in ways that defied gravity and common sense, spinning down in a controlled fall that should have been impossible. When her feet touched the stage again, she didn't bow. Didn't smile at the applause thundering through the space. She simply walked off stage like she'd completed a transaction and had no interest in validation from anyone. Julian realized he'd been holding his breath. "That's Simone," Enzo said quietly. "Been performing here 8 months. You know how many marriage proposals she's turned down? 4. 2 from congressmen. 1 from that basketball player over there. 1 from the tech guy who offered her $5 million to quit dancing and move to San Francisco. What did she say? No. Just no. Performs her sets, collects her money, disappears. Nobody knows where she lives. Nobody knows what she does during the day. Nobody knows her real story." Enzo leaned forward. "You know why I brought you here, boss?" Julian couldn't look away from where she'd exited the stage. "Tell me." "Because she's you. Different circumstances, different path, but the same result. Someone who learned that being untouchable beats being vulnerable every single time." Enzo paused. "And because I've watched you build walls for 15 years, and I'm tired of seeing you alone." Julian should have been angry. Should have shut down this amateur psychology from his underboss. Should have left immediately and handled Petrov and gone back to his empty penthouse where at least the isolation was familiar. Instead, he found himself standing. "Where are you going?" Enzo's voice carried alarm. "To do something stupid." Julian moved through the lounge, his presence causing ripples. People recognized him, some from photographs, some from reputation, some from actual business dealings they'd prefer stayed private. They all had the same reaction: immediate tension, careful neutrality, eyes that tracked him while pretending not to. The backstage entrance was guarded by a man who looked ex-military. Shaved head, neck thick as a tree trunk, hands that had clearly broken things, possibly people. He stepped into Julian's path. "Private area, sir. I need to speak with Simone. She doesn't take visitors after. Tell her Julian Moretti wants 5 minutes of her time." The guard's expression didn't change, but something shifted in his posture. Recognition, calculation. The decision tree of someone deciding whether this situation required violence. "Wait here." He disappeared through the door, leaving Julian alone in the narrow hallway. Music leaked from the main floor, muffled and distant. Julian's heart pounded in a way it hadn't since the first time he'd pulled a trigger at 19, watching a man who'd betrayed his father fall like a puppet with cut strings. The guard returned. "She says 5 minutes. Clock starts when you walk through that door." Julian pushed through into a corridor lined with dressing rooms. Faint music came from the last door on the left, not the sultry jazz from the main stage, but hip-hop, something with bass that hit like a heartbeat. Through the small window in the door, he saw her. Stretching, earbuds in, completely focused on her body's movement. The stage costume was gone, replaced by simple workout clothes that somehow made her look more dangerous than the performance outfit. Julian knocked once. She turned slowly. No surprise in her eyes. No fear. Just cold, calculating assessment as she pulled out one earbud. Julian Moretti. Her voice carried smoke and steel. You're either incredibly brave or phenomenally stupid coming back here without your security detail. You know who I am. Everyone knows who you are. The question is, what do you want? Julian had rehearsed a dozen opening lines during the walk. Smooth, charming, disarming. The kind of approach that had worked on the 9 women before their research revealed the truth. But standing in front of Simone, watching those dark eyes cut through every defense he'd ever built, the truth just fell out. I watched you perform and saw someone who understands what it costs to be untouchable. Simone studied him for a long moment, her expression unreadable. And that made you think, what? That we'd bond over our emotional isolation? That 2 lonely people could make each other less lonely? Maybe. She laughed, but there was no humor in it. Sharp, bitter, the sound of someone who'd heard every line and believed none of them. I don't date customers. I don't date criminals. And I definitely don't date men whose reputations include the word butcher. So if that's what you're fishing for, you can leave right now. I'm not here to date you. Then what? Julian hesitated. What was he here for? He barely understood it himself. 5 minutes of conversation. Just 5 minutes where you tell me if I'm insane for thinking that someone like you might understand someone like me. Simone's expression shifted slightly. Not softening exactly, she didn't look like someone who softened for anyone. But calculating, weighing risk against potential reward. Her eyes moved over him, cataloging details most people missed. The slight bulge under his left arm where he kept a weapon, the way he stood with his back to the wall. Never the door, the expensive watch that cost more than most people's cars but wasn't flashy enough to draw attention. Why would I waste 5 minutes on you? Because, in the 30 seconds we've been talking, you haven't looked away once. And because I think you're just as exhausted by being untouchable as I am. She stared at him. The music from her earbuds leaked into the silence, something aggressive, something about survival. Finally, she glanced at her phone, then back at his face. 5 minutes, clocks ticking. They stood in that small practice room, and the air between them felt electric, dangerous, like standing too close to a live wire and being unable to step back. I'm from Detroit, Simone said abruptly. East Side. My father was killed in a drive-by when I was 8. Wrong place, wrong time, wrong color in the wrong neighborhood. My brother got caught up in the system, arrested at 15, tried as an adult, sent to prison where a guard beat him to death over a dropped food tray when he was 23. The system called it an accident during restraint. The guard kept his job. My brother got buried in a county cemetery. Julian felt something crack in his chest. I'm sorry, don't be. I'm telling you because you need to understand something about me. I learned to dance because it was the only thing I could control. The only thing that made me feel powerful instead of powerless. Every movement on that stage is mine. Every decision, every choice, every moment, mine. Nobody takes that from me. My father died when I was 19, Julian said, the words coming easier than they should have. Rival family. They shot him in front of me, wanted me to watch. Wanted me to know that I was next if I didn't surrender everything he'd built. I inherited his organization and his enemies the same day I buried him, by becoming the thing people fear most. Yes. And now you're lonely. Understanding threaded through her voice, not judgment. Now you've realized that fear keeps people at the same distance as bullets, maybe further. 9 women in 4 months, Julian admitted quietly. The number felt heavier spoken aloud. The second they really understand who I am, they run. They Google my name and find the speculation, the accusations, the crime scene photos from investigations that went nowhere. Or their families intervene concerned fathers with folders full of evidence. And I don't blame them. I am the butcher of Brooklyn. I've ordered executions. I've made problems disappear permanently. I've done things that would make you walk out of this room and never look back. You think you're the only one with blood on your hands? Simone's voice dropped to something raw and dangerous. She stepped closer, close enough that Julian could smell her perfume, something dark and expensive that reminded him of smoke and spices. I killed a man when I was 17. Beat him with a tire iron until he stopped moving. He tried to rape me after a performance at a club in Detroit. Followed me to my car. Thought he could take what I wouldn't give. I grabbed the first weapon I could reach. and I didn't stop hitting him until my arms gave out. Never got caught, never told anyone until right now. But I see his face every single night before I fall asleep. The confession hung between them like smoke from a gun neither wanted to holster. Julian's heart hammered against his ribs. This woman, this stranger he'd known for less than 5 minutes, had just handed him ammunition that could destroy her. A murder confession. No statute of limitations. One phone call to the right people, and her life was over. Why tell me? His voice came out rougher than intended. Because you asked for 5 minutes of truth, and I'm exhausted from pretending to be something I'm not. She held his gaze, unflinching. Your time's up, Julian. You can leave now, or you can tell me what you really want. Julian's mouth went dry. Every instinct screamed at him to walk away. This woman was dangerous not to his body, but to every wall he'd spent 15 years building. She saw too much. Understood too much. Matched him in ways that made him feel exposed and terrified and more alive than he'd felt in months. Dinner, he said. Tomorrow night. Somewhere nobody knows either of us. No expectations, no games, no performances. Just two people who've survived things that should have destroyed them. Simone pulled a card from her bag, plain white. No business name, just a phone number written in neat script. She handed it to him, her fingers brushing his for just a second. The contact sent electricity up his arm. One dinner. But I carry a knife, and I know exactly where to put it if you're not what you're pretending to be. I'm not pretending to be anything. That's the problem. She smiled, and it was the saddest, most honest smile Julian had ever seen, like looking in a mirror and seeing someone else's broken reflection staring back. Then maybe we're already ahead of most people. Julian left the Obsidian Lounge feeling like he'd just survived something. His legs didn't quite work right. His heart pounded too fast. His hands shook slightly as he climbed into the Escalade. Enzo was waiting in the corner booth, eyebrows raised in question. Well? Meeting with Petrov can wait, Julian said, his voice distant. Boss, Petrov's not going to. I said it can wait. For the first time in 15 years, Julian Moretti put something ahead of his organization, ahead of territory disputes and power plays, and the constant chess game that kept him alive. He put a woman with dark eyes and darker secrets first. And he had no idea that at that exact moment, his head of security was reviewing exterior camera footage from the Obsidian Lounge, footage showing Julian going backstage alone, footage being copied and encrypted and sent to interested parties across the city. In a penthouse in Brighton Beach, Alexei Petrov received the file with a smile that promised blood. He opened the images on his laptop, studying each frame carefully. Julian Moretti, the untouchable butcher of Brooklyn, disappearing backstage to meet with a dancer. Finally, Petrov said in Russian, his accent thick with satisfaction. The bastard has a weakness. He picked up his phone and made 3 calls. First to his underboss, giving orders to identify the woman. Second to his contact in the NYPD, requesting background on anyone connected to the Obsidian Lounge. Third to someone whose number wasn't saved in any phone, whose voice was always disguised, whose services cost more than most people earned in a year. I need surveillance, Petrov said. Complete coverage. The target is protected, so this needs to be invisible. Can you handle it? The distorted voice on the other end laughed. I can handle anything. Send me the details. Petrov ended the call and poured himself vodka from a bottle that cost $4,000. He raised the glass toward the images on his screen. Julian Moretti, the man who'd blocked his expansion into Manhattan for 2 years, who'd sent bodies back in pieces when Petrov tested his boundaries, who'd built a reputation so fearsome that even discussing him required careful language. That man had just given Petrov exactly what he needed. Leverage. To weaknesses, Petrov said to the empty room. And to the women who create them. He drank deeply, already planning his next moves, already calculating how to turn Julian's moment of hope into his own pathway to power. Meanwhile, Julian sat in his penthouse staring at the card Simone had given him. Just a phone number. No name, no context, nothing that would mean anything to anyone else. But to him, it represented something he'd stopped believing possible. A chance. Just a chance that maybe, possibly, he didn't have to die alone. His phone buzzed. Enzo. Boss. The council's getting impatient. Petrov's people are asking when you're going to address the territory situation. Julian typed back, tomorrow. Tell them I'll handle everything tomorrow. Another buzz. Everything okay? Julian looked at Simone's card, then at the city glittering beyond his windows. Better than it's been in a long time. He didn't sleep that night. Couldn't. His mind replayed every second of their conversation. The way she'd looked at him without fear. The confession she'd given him, like a gift wrapped in trust. The understanding in her voice when she'd described his loneliness. 9 women had run from who he was. 1 woman had recognized it and stayed. Julian Moretti, the butcher of Brooklyn, fell asleep at dawn with his phone clutched in his hand and Simone's number memorized. For the first time in months, he dreamed of something other than blood and empty rooms. He dreamed of dark eyes that saw everything and didn't flinch. One conversation changed everything. Julian saw someone who understood survival. Simone saw someone who matched her darkness. Neither realized they were being watched. The Obsidian Lounge closed at 3 in the morning. Simone stayed until 4, alone in the practice room, working through routines that her body already knew by heart. Muscle memory wasn't enough. Perfect wasn't enough. She demanded flawless, and flawless required repetition until her legs shook and sweat soaked through her clothes. But tonight, her body moved on autopilot, while her mind replayed a 5-minute conversation that shouldn't have mattered. Julian Moretti, the butcher of Brooklyn. The man whose name appeared in whispered conversations throughout Harlem, whose reputation preceded him like a warning siren, whose organization controlled everything, from gambling to protection rackets to the flow of goods through half of New York's ports. She'd known exactly who he was the moment he walked through her door. What she hadn't expected was the look in his eyes, that same haunted emptiness she saw in her own reflection every morning. The expression of someone who'd survived by becoming harder than whatever tried to break them, and was now trapped inside armor they couldn't remove. Simone stopped mid-movement, breathing hard. Her reflection stared back from the mirrored wall, dark skin gleaming with exertion, muscles defined from years of conditioning, face set in the mask she wore for everyone. Everyone except, apparently, Julian Moretti. Why had she told him about the killing? That secret had lived locked inside her for 7 years. Nobody knew. Not her mother in Detroit, who thought Simone had simply moved to New York for better opportunities. Not the aunt who'd taken her in after her brother died. Not the crew from her old neighborhood who'd helped her disappear. Nobody. Until a crime lord walked into her practice room and asked for 5 minutes of truth. And she'd given it to him. Simone grabbed her bag and headed for the exit. The club was empty now, just the cleaning crew working through the main floor. The bouncer who'd guarded the backstage entrance, Big Mike, ex-army, loyal as a dog and twice as protective, looked up from his phone. "You good, Simone?" "I'm fine, Mike. That guy earlier, Moretti." Mike's expression was carefully neutral. "You know who he is?" "I know. And you still talk to him?" Simone smiled without humor. "I've survived worse than men with reputations, Mike. You know that." Mike nodded, but concern lingered in his eyes. He'd worked at the lounge since Simone started performing 8 months ago, had scared off the handsy customers, the entitled rich boys who thought her body was for sale, the men who couldn't accept that no meant no. He'd become something like a friend in a city where Simone had exactly 0 friends. "Just be careful," he said. "Men like Moretti, they're dangerous in ways that don't leave bruises." "I know what I'm doing." The lie tasted bitter on her tongue. Outside, Harlem was transitioning from night to morning. The club district was winding down, last stragglers stumbling toward taxis, while a few blocks over, the early risers were already emerging, bodega owners opening their gates, construction workers grabbing coffee before their shifts, nurses and hospital staff in scrubs heading home after overnight shifts. Simone's apartment was 12 blocks away. She could have taken a cab, but she preferred walking, preferred the time alone where she could be herself instead of the performance, the mask, the untouchable dancer everyone wanted but nobody could have. Her phone buzzed. Unknown number. She almost didn't check blocking her number hadn't stopped the marriage proposals or the creepy messages from customers who somehow got her contact information. But something made her look. "Tomorrow night. 7 p.m. I'll text you the address. Julian." Simone stared at the message. He'd waited exactly 4 hours to reach out. Not desperate, not too casual, calculated. The move of someone who understood how to navigate power dynamics without appearing weak. She should have ignored it, should have blocked the number and forgotten the whole interaction, should have recognized that getting involved with someone like Julian Moretti was a disaster waiting to happen. Instead, she typed, "Don't be late." His response came immediately. "I'm never late." Simone pocketed her phone and kept walking, a smile tugging at her lips despite every survival instinct screaming at her to run. Across town, in a surveillance van parked 3 blocks from the Obsidian Lounge, 2 men reviewed footage on multiple monitors. High-definition cameras had tracked Simone's exit, capturing her face in perfect detail under the streetlights. "That's her," the first man said, his accent marking him as Eastern European, the one Petrov once identified. The second man, younger but equally professional, ran facial recognition software through multiple databases. Criminal records first, then social media, then the deeper networks that required less legal access. Simone Carter, he read from the screen. Age 25. No criminal record. Social media presence is minimal. Instagram account for her dancing. Nothing personal. Listed address is in Queens, but it's probably fake. These dancers never use their real addresses. Background? That's where it gets interesting. The younger man pulled up another file. Birth certificate says Detroit, Michigan. Father deceased drive-by shooting when she was 8. Brother deceased killed in prison 6 years ago. Mother still alive, living in Detroit. He scrolled further. But here's the thing. There's a 7-year gap in her employment history. No tax returns, no addresses, no paper trail of any kind. She just appears in New York 8 months ago and starts dancing at the lounge. People don't just appear. Everyone has a trail. Unless they're running from something. The younger man switched screens. Or running from someone. He pulled up a cold case file from Detroit Police Department. The file was password protected, but he bypassed it in seconds. Skills learned from the Russian intelligence services before Petrov recruited him for private work. The case file showed a crime scene from 7 years ago. A parking lot behind a Detroit nightclub. Blood pattern analysis. Evidence markers. And at the bottom, a list of persons of interest. Tyra Simone Carter, age 17. Wanted for questioning in the death of Marcus Deshaun Webb. Well, the older man said, leaning forward. Our untouchable dancer has quite the history. He snapped photos of the screen with his phone and sent them directly to Petrov's encrypted line. Within seconds, his phone rang. Tell me everything, Petrov's voice demanded. The older man relayed the information, while his partner continued digging through databases. The more they searched, the more interesting Simone Carter became. The case file from Detroit showed that Marcus Webb had been found beaten to death, his skull fractured in multiple places, defensive wounds on his arms suggesting a prolonged attack. Simone had been the last person seen with him, but she disappeared before police could bring her in for questioning. Why was the case never pursued? Petrov asked. Witness cooperation dried up. Webb's family stopped pushing for prosecution. There's a note in the file from the lead detective suggesting the victim had a history of violence against women, and the investigator believed it was self-defense. Without witnesses or physical evidence, the case went cold, so she killed him and walked away. Appears that way. Petrov was quiet for a moment. This is perfect. Keep the surveillance active. I want to know everywhere she goes, everyone she speaks to, every detail of her life, and find out everything about her connection to Moretti, how long they've known each other, how serious it is, whether she's a casual distraction or something more. Understood. The call ended. The 2 men in the van settled in for a long shift, cameras trained on every entrance to Simone's building, software running facial recognition on everyone who came and went, building a comprehensive profile of a woman who'd spent 7 years trying to disappear. Simone's apartment was exactly what someone would expect from a dancer at an upscale club. Small but meticulously maintained. 1 bedroom, 1 bathroom, a kitchen barely large enough for 1 person. The furniture was minimal IKEA quality, functional rather than stylish. The only personal touches were photographs on the refrigerator held by magnets. Her mother, her late brother, an aunt in Detroit who'd taken Simone in after her brother died. No photographs of friends, no evidence of a social life. Just work and survival. Simone showered, washing away the performance and the sweat and the lingering scent of the club. She should have been exhausted. It was nearly 5 in the morning, and she'd been on her feet for 9 hours, but her mind wouldn't stop racing. Julian Moretti. The way he'd looked at her without the hunger she saw in most men's eyes. The way he'd asked for 5 minutes like it mattered, like she mattered beyond her body and her performance. The way he'd shared his own darkness without flinching from hers. 9 women had run from him, he'd said. 9 women who couldn't handle his reputation once they learned the truth. Simone understood that. She'd spent 7 years running from her own truth. From the night she'd killed Marcus Webb in a parking lot behind the club where she'd been dancing to pay for community college. From the moment she'd realized that the system wouldn't protect her, that Marcus's connections would ensure she ended up dead or in prison, that the only way to survive was to disappear. Detroit to Chicago first. New name, new look, cash-only jobs that didn't require background checks. 6 months of hiding before moving again. Chicago to Atlanta, Atlanta to Philadelphia, Philadelphia to New York. each city erasing a little more of who she'd been, building someone new on top of the ruins. Tyra Simone Carter died in that parking lot with Marcus Webb. Simone, just Simone, no last name needed, had been born in its place. But tonight, for 5 minutes, she'd let Julian see the ghost of Tyra, the girl who'd killed to survive, the woman who carried that weight every single day, and he hadn't run. Simone dried off and climbed into bed, but sleep wouldn't come. She picked up her phone and stared at Julian's last message. "I'm never late." Simple words carrying enormous weight. A promise, a statement of reliability in a world where most promises shattered the moment they became inconvenient. Before she could second-guess herself, Simone opened a different message thread. Detroit area code. A contact saved only as K. "Need to know if anyone's been asking questions about me, about what happened." She sent it at 5:47 a.m., not expecting a response until much later. But her phone buzzed within 2 minutes. "Nobody's asked anything in years. Why? Something happen?" Kiana, Marcus Webb's sister. The only person who'd known the truth about that night. The only person who'd told the police that Marcus had been violent, that he'd attacked Simone first, that it was self-defense. The only reason the case had gone cold instead of becoming a manhunt. Simone typed carefully. "Met someone. Someone with connections. Want to make sure my past stays buried. Who? Better if you don't know. Just keep your ears open. If anyone starts digging, I need warning. You know I got you. Always have." Simone felt her throat tighten. Kiana had every reason to hate her. Marcus had been her brother, blood, family, but Kiana had also lived with Marcus's violence, had covered bruises with makeup and lied to their mother about accidents for years, had watched her brother spiral into someone she didn't recognize. When Simone disappeared, Kiana had made a choice: protect her brother's killer or tell the truth. She'd chosen truth. "Thank you," Simone typed, "for everything. Just don't make me regret it. Be careful, Simone." The message thread went quiet. Simone set her phone aside and finally felt sleep pulling at her. But before she surrendered to it, one last thought surfaced. Julian Moretti was dangerous. Not because he was violent, though she had no doubt he was capable of terrible things. Not because he was powerful, though his reach extended through half the city. He was dangerous because he saw her, really saw her, past the performance and the mask and the walls she'd built to keep everyone at a distance, and Simone was terrified that she saw him just as clearly. Julian stood at his floor-to-ceiling windows, watching the sun rise over Manhattan. He hadn't slept. Couldn't. His mind kept replaying Simone's confession, the weight of it, the trust implicit in sharing something so devastating. "I killed a man when I was 17. 9 words that changed everything. Most people would have run from that admission. Would have seen a murderer instead of a survivor. Would have calculated the risk of being connected to someone with that kind of past. Julian saw someone who understood that survival sometimes required violence, that the world didn't always offer clean choices between right and wrong, that sometimes you did terrible things because the alternative was dying. He understood it because he lived it. His phone buzzed. "Enzo, council meeting in 2 hours. Petrov's people are here. Can't push this any longer, boss." Julian checked the time. 6:15 a.m. He'd been awake for 24 hours straight, running on adrenaline and the lingering electricity of 5 minutes in a practice room. Continue, 9:36 a.m., with a woman who matched his darkness. "I'll be there," he typed back. He showered and dressed in the armor of his profession. A suit that cost more than most people's monthly rent. A watch that whispered power without screaming it. The kind of shoes that came from Italian craftsmen whose families had been making them for generations. By the time he finished, Julian Moretti the man had disappeared. The butcher of Brooklyn looked back from the mirror untouchable, unbreakable, ready for war. But underneath the armor, his heart carried Simone's number like a talisman. The council meeting was held in a restaurant Julian owned in Chinatown. Officially, the Golden Dynasty served dim sum and Peking duck to tourists and locals. Unofficially, the back room had witnessed more criminal negotiations than most courtrooms. Julian's captains were already assembled when he arrived. 6 men who ran different aspects of his organization: gambling, protection, imports, labor unions, money laundering, enforcement. Each one capable of terrible violence, each one loyal beyond question. And at the head of the table, waiting with the patient menace of a cobra, sat Alexei Petrov. Moretti. Petrov's accent made the name sound like an insult. "Finally. I was beginning to think you'd forgotten about our meeting." "I don't forget anything, Petrov. I prioritize. Julian took his seat at the opposite end of the table, his captains flanking him like an honor guard. You wanted to discuss territory, so talk. Petrov smiled, and it was the smile of a man holding a winning hand. I want to discuss expansion. My operations in Brighton Beach have reached capacity. I need to grow, and Manhattan offers opportunities. Manhattan is mine. All of Manhattan? Petrov leaned back, fingers steepled. That seems ambitious. Surely there's room for negotiation, for cooperation between organizations. There's no room. Find opportunities elsewhere. Where? Brooklyn is divided among 3 families who've held their territories for 40 years. Queens belongs to the Chinese. The Bronx is a war zone. You've left me nowhere to expand except Manhattan, and you block every attempt. That's not my problem. Petrov's smile vanished. It will become your problem if I make it one. The room went dead silent. Julian's captains tensed, hands moving closer to concealed weapons. Enzo's eyes never left Petrov, calculating angles and distances. Julian didn't move. Are you threatening me? I'm stating reality. You can't hold all of Manhattan forever. Eventually, you'll make a mistake. Get distracted. Show weakness. Petrov's eyes glittered with something ugly. And when that happens, I'll be there to capitalize on it. Get out. Excuse me? Get out of my restaurant. This meeting is over. You want Manhattan? You'll have to take it from me. And we both know how that ends. Petrov stood slowly, his guards moving with him. You're making a mistake, Moretti. A big one. I've made bigger. Petrov left with his guards, the restaurant's back door closing behind them with a solid thud. The tension in the room didn't ease. If anything, it intensified. Enzo spoke first. Boss, that was a declaration of war. I know. He's going to come at us hard. Petrov's been planning something for months. I can feel it. He didn't make that threat unless he thinks he has leverage. Julian thought about the footage his security chief had mentioned. The cameras at the Obsidian Lounge. The possibility that Petrov already knew about Simone. Double security on all our operations. Julian ordered. Rotate the guards so nobody gets predictable. And I want eyes on Petrov's organization. Every meeting, every phone call, every move they make. His captains nodded, filing out to implement the orders. Only Enzo remained. You're going to see her tonight, Enzo said. Not a question. Yes, Petrov knows about her. Has to. That's why he made his move today. He thinks you're distracted. I'm not distracted. No? Enzo's expression was skeptical. When's the last time you pushed a council meeting? When's the last time you let anything come before the organization? Julian didn't have an answer. Enzo sighed. Just be careful, boss. Women like her, they're dangerous in ways bullets aren't. They make you hope for things you can't have. And hope makes you vulnerable. I know what I'm doing. Do you? Because from where I'm standing, you're walking into something you're not prepared for. And Petrov's going to use it against you the first chance he gets. Julian wanted to argue, wanted to insist that he could compartmentalize, that Simone was just a distraction, that nothing would compromise his control over the organization he'd built. But the lie wouldn't form. I need this, Enzo. I need someone who understands what it costs to survive in this world. Someone who won't run the moment they see who I really am. And if Petrov comes after her, if he uses her as leverage, Julian's voice went cold. Then Petrov learns why my reputation exists, and why people call me the Butcher. At 6:47 p.m., Julian sent Simone an address, a small Italian restaurant in Queens called Renzo's. Family-owned for 60 years, red sauce and honest food, no celebrities or status games. Her response came 5 minutes later. I'll be there. Julian arrived at 6:55 p.m. The owner, an old man named Sal who'd known Julian's father, gave him a corner table without being asked. The kind of table with sightlines to all exits and a wall behind it. The kind of table men like Julian required to feel safe enough to have a conversation. At exactly 7 p.m., a yellow cab pulled up outside. Simone emerged wearing a simple emerald dress that somehow made her look more regal than all the designer-clad women Julian had dated. She walked toward the restaurant with the same confidence from the stage, but he noticed her hand gripping her small purse a little too tight. She was nervous. The realization hit Julian like a punch. This untouchable dancer who'd turned down millionaires and politicians was nervous about dinner with him. The door opened. Their eyes met. And Julian Moretti, the butcher of Brooklyn, felt something he hadn't felt in years. Hope that maybe, impossibly, this could work. You came, he said, standing. You doubted I would? A little. Simone smiled. I keep my word, always. She sat across from him, and the world narrowed to just the two of them. The restaurant faded, the threat from Petrov faded, everything faded except the woman with dark eyes who saw his darkness and didn't run. Tell me something, Simone said. Something real. Like what? Like why you're really here. Why you tracked down my number and asked for this dinner. What you're hoping for. Julian took a breath. Truth or performance? Armor or vulnerability? He chose vulnerability. I'm here because for the first time in 9 attempts, I met someone who didn't flinch when I showed them who I really am. I'm here because I'm tired of dying alone in a penthouse filled with everything except what matters. I'm here because I think you understand that better than anyone I've ever met. Simone held his gaze. And what are you hoping for? A chance. Just a chance that maybe we're both wrong about how alone we have to be. She reached across the table, her fingers stopping just short of his hand. Okay, let's see if two broken people's pieces fit together. Their hands touched, and Julian felt electricity arc between them. Neither of them noticed the surveillance camera across the street. Neither saw the van parked 3 blocks away with high-definition recording equipment. Neither knew that every word, every gesture, every moment was being documented and sent directly to Alexei Petrov. They were too busy discovering that monsters could recognize each other, that survival didn't have to mean isolation, that sometimes the most dangerous thing you could do was hope. One dinner changed the game. 2 damaged souls found connection. But in the shadows, Petrov was watching, planning, waiting for the perfect moment to strike. The dinner lasted 3 hours. Julian and Simone talked like people who'd been starved for real conversation. Not the surface pleasantries that filled most social interactions. Not the careful navigation of what could and couldn't be said. Real talk. The kind that exposed wounds and admitted failures and acknowledged that survival sometimes meant doing terrible things. Simone told him about Detroit, about growing up in a neighborhood where gunshots were background noise and sirens were lullabies. About her father's murder when she was 8. Wrong place, wrong time. Black man in America's particular brand of bad luck. About her brother Terrence, who'd tried to protect her after their father died, who'd gotten caught up in the system at 15 and never made it out alive. He was 23 when they killed him, Simone said, her voice steady but her eyes carrying old pain. Prison guard beat him to death over a dropped food tray. The system called it an accident during restraint. The guard kept his job, got a commendation for staying calm under pressure. Terrence got buried in a county cemetery that floods every spring. Julian reached across the table and took her hand. The contact felt natural, necessary. I'm sorry. Don't be. I'm not telling you for sympathy. I'm telling you so you understand why I don't trust systems. Why I learned early that the only person who's going to protect you is yourself. Why I killed Marcus Webb and didn't lose sleep over it. Tell me about that night. Simone's fingers tightened around his. You sure you want to know? I want to know everything. She took a breath, and Julian watched her make the decision to trust him. Really trust him. Not with the sanitized version, but with the truth that had shaped her. I was 17, dancing at a club called Midnight Blue on the east side, trying to save money for college because my grades were good but my family had nothing. Marcus Webb was a regular low-level enforcer for the Disciples, one of Detroit's biggest crews. He'd been watching me for weeks, always sitting at the same table, always leaving big tips, always respectful, until he wasn't. Simone's voice stayed calm, clinical, like she was describing something that happened to someone else, but Julian could see the cost in her eyes. After my last set, I went to my car. Old Honda, barely running, but it was mine. Marcus was waiting, said he'd been patient, said he'd shown me respect, said it was time I showed him something back. When I told him no, he grabbed me, slammed me against the car, started tearing at my clothes. Julian felt rage ignite in his chest, hot and immediate. I fought him, Simone continued. Scratched his face, screamed, tried everything I'd learned in the self-defense class my brother had made me take. But Marcus was bigger, stronger, and he had me pinned. I thought I was going to die. Or worse. What happened? My car trunk was open. I'd been loading my dance bag. There was a tire iron right there, maybe 2 feet from my hand. I grabbed it and I swung as hard as I could, hit him in the head. He went down, but he didn't stay down. So I hit him again, and again, and again. I didn't stop until my arms gave out and he stopped moving. The restaurant faded. Julian saw that 17-year-old girl in a parking lot, covered in blood, holding a weapon, realizing her life had just changed forever. Then what? Then I ran. Not far, just to a payphone a block away. Called Marcus's sister, Kiana. We'd been friendly, said hello at the club, talked sometimes. I told her what happened. She came to the parking lot, looked at her brother's body, looked at me, and you know what she said? What? He deserved it. I'll handle this. Simone's eyes were bright with unshed tears. Kiana called the police, told them she'd found her brother. When they asked if she knew who did it, she said no. When they asked if Marcus had problems with anyone, she told them the truth, that he was violent with women, that he'd hurt people before, that whoever killed him probably had a damn good reason. She protected you. She protected the truth. There's a difference. Simone pulled her hand back, wiping her eyes. The police investigated for a few months. My name came up. I'd been the last person seen with Marcus. Security cameras showed us talking inside the club, but Kiana refused to cooperate with prosecution, said her brother got what was coming to him. Without her testimony and without me, the case went cold. So you disappeared. Detroit to Chicago, Chicago to Atlanta, Atlanta to Philadelphia, Philadelphia to New York. 7 years of running from a crime that might never catch up with me. 7 years of building someone new on top of who I used to be. Simone met his eyes. And now I'm sitting across from a crime lord who could use that information to destroy me. So tell me, Julian, was I stupid to trust you? Julian felt the weight of her question. This woman had just handed him a weapon that could obliterate her life. One phone call to the right people and Simone Carter would cease to exist. She'd spend the rest of her life in prison. Or worse, she'd become a target for the disciples who'd want revenge for Marcus Webb. No, Julian said quietly. You weren't stupid, because I understand what you did. I understand that sometimes survival requires violence, that the world doesn't always offer clean choices between right and wrong, that you do what you have to do and live with the consequences. 9 women ran from you, Simone said. Why won't I? Because you're not running from violence. You're running from judgment. And I'm not here to judge you. I'm here because I finally met someone who understands that monsters aren't born. They're made by circumstance and necessity and the brutal math of survival. Simone stared at him for a long moment. Then she smiled, and it was real this time. Not the sad smile from their first meeting, but something genuine and warm and alive. Okay, she said. Let's do this. Let's see if 2 people with blood on their hands can build something that doesn't end in disaster. I should warn you, Julian said. My life is complicated, dangerous. People die around me. The feds watch me constantly. And right now, a Russian named Petrov is trying to take my territory. If you're with me, you become a target. Then teach me how to survive in your world instead of being a liability. You want in? I want honesty. I want someone who won't lie about who they are or what they've done. If that means learning to recognize a tail and handle a weapon, then that's what I'll do. I've survived worse with less. Julian felt something shift in his chest. This wasn't the desperate hope he'd felt with the others. This was something solid, something real. Respect mixed with desire, mixed with the recognition that he'd found someone who could stand beside him instead of behind him. Okay, he said, but it starts right now. We're being watched. Simone's posture didn't change, but he saw the subtle shift in her awareness. Where? Black sedan across the street. Been there since we arrived. 2 men inside, one with a camera. Russian plates. Petrov? Julian raised an eyebrow. You know about Petrov? I work in Harlem. I hear things. Russian boss trying to expand into your territory. Thinks you're getting soft. She took a casual sip of wine. What do you want to do about them? Nothing. Let them watch. Let them report back that I'm on a date. And when they use me as leverage? Julian smiled, and it wasn't a nice smile. Then they learn why my reputation exists. But first, they have to get through you. And something tells me that's not as easy as they think. Simone smiled back, steel visible beneath the silk. You're damn right it's not. They finished dinner talking strategy like battlefield commanders. Julian explained the basics of his organization, the legitimate businesses that fronted criminal operations, the network of loyalty built through respect and fear, the delicate balance of power that kept him alive and in control. Simone absorbed it all with the focus of someone studying for a final exam. She asked smart questions, made connections Julian hadn't expected, saw patterns that took most people years to recognize. You're a natural at this, he said as they prepared to leave. I'm a survivor. Always have been. This is just a different battlefield with different rules. Julian walked her to a cab, hyper-aware of the surveillance across the street. When they reached the curb, Simone leaned in and kissed his cheek. Her lips were soft against his scarred face, and Julian felt the touch like electricity. "Tomorrow," she said. "I want to see where you work, your real office, not some legitimate business front. If we're doing this, I need to see all of it. That's dangerous. Everything about you is dangerous. That's not going to change." She got into the cab but left the window down. "But I'm not some civilian who needs protecting. I'm someone who needs to know exactly what I'm walking into. Pick me up at 7. The cab drove away, and Julian watched the Russian sedan pull out to follow her. He pulled out his phone and called Enzo. 2 Russians following a woman in a yellow cab heading north on Queens Boulevard. "Make sure she gets home safe, then bring them to the warehouse. You want them alive? For now. I want to know what Petrov thinks he knows." Julian got into his own car, his mind already working through the implications. Simone was right if they were going to do this. She needed to see everything. But bringing her into his world meant exposing her to danger she couldn't fully understand yet. It meant making her a target for everyone who wanted to hurt him. His phone buzzed. Unknown number, a text with 3 photos attached. Julian and Simone outside the restaurant. Julian and Simone at their table, hands touching. Julian and Simone by the cab, her lips on his cheek. Then a message. "The butcher has found something soft." How unfortunate for her. Julian's blood ran cold. This wasn't just surveillance. This was a threat. Direct, immediate, personal. He called Simone. "I need you to listen carefully," he said when she answered. "Don't go home. Give the cab driver this address." He rattled off the location of a safe house in Astoria. "My people are following you. Let them. When you get there, someone named Enzo will meet you. Trust him." "What's happening?" "Petrov knows about you. Which means you're in danger whether you stay with me or not. So we're doing this my way, starting now." There was a pause. Then, "Okay. But Julian, this better be worth it. I'll make sure it is." He hung up and called Enzo back. "Change of plans. Bring the Russians to me alive. And send a team to Petrov's social club in Brighton Beach. I want eyes on everyone coming and going. The war just started, and I'm not letting him make the first real move. Boss, if we hit back now, it escalates fast. Good, let it escalate. But this time I'm not alone." What Julian didn't know was that at that exact moment, Simone was sitting in the back of the cab with her hand wrapped around the knife in her purse and a smile on her face, because she'd seen the Russians following her, had spotted them 10 minutes before Julian called. And she'd already sent a text to her own people, the crew from Detroit, who'd helped her disappear years ago, who owed her favors that went bone deep. "Need eyes on a situation in New York. Russians making moves against someone I care about. You in?" The response came immediately. "Always. Give us a location." Simone typed out the address of Petrov's social club and hit send. She wasn't some damsel waiting to be saved. She was a woman who'd survived Detroit's east side by learning to hit first and hit hard. And if Petrov thought he could use her as leverage, he was about to learn a very painful lesson. 2 days later, 3 of Petrov's lieutenants were found beaten nearly to death in a parking lot in Coney Island. No witnesses, no evidence, just a message carved into the hood of their car. "Stay away from Detroit." In the surveillance van, the 2 Russians monitoring Simone's movements received a panicked call from Brighton Beach. "3 of our people are in the hospital," the voice said in Russian. "Someone hit them hard. We don't know who, but there's a message about Detroit." The older Russian looked at his partner. "Detroit. That's where the dancer is from. You think she's connected to this? I think we underestimated her." He picked up his encrypted phone and called Petrov. "Sir, we have a situation." When Petrov heard about the attack, he went very still, the kind of still that preceded volcanic rage. "This dancer," he said slowly. "She's not just some civilian Moretti is sleeping with. She has her own people, her own organization. It appears so. Find out everything, every connection she has, every person she knows, every detail of her life before New York. If she has crew in Detroit willing to come to New York and assault my people, she's more dangerous than we thought. What do you want us to do?" Petrov smiled, cold and calculating. "We adjust our strategy. Moretti thinks he can protect her. Let's test that assumption. Thoroughly." He ended the call and pulled up the surveillance photos again. Simone Carter, the untouchable dancer who'd rejected millionaires and politicians. Simone Carter, who apparently had connections to Detroit's criminal underworld. Simone Carter, who'd just beaten 3 of his men and left them with a warning. This woman was interesting. More interesting than he'd anticipated. which meant she was also more valuable. More leverage. More potential to break the unbreakable butcher of Brooklyn. You made a mistake, Moretti, Petrov said to the photos. You found someone worth protecting, and that makes you vulnerable for the first time in 15 years. He picked up his phone and made another call. This one to someone whose services cost significantly more than surveillance. Someone whose specialty was making people disappear. I need an extraction, Petrov said. Target is protected, but there are always windows of opportunity. Can you handle it? The voice on the other end was calm, professional. I can handle anything. Send me the details. Petrov forwarded everything: Simone's photos, her schedule, her known associates, the layout of her building, everything his surveillance team had collected over the past 48 hours. When? He asked. Give me 3 days. I'll find the window. The call ended. Petrov poured himself vodka and raised the glass toward Manhattan, where Julian Moretti was probably celebrating his new relationship, feeling hope for the first time in years, believing he'd finally found someone who understood him. That hope was about to become his biggest weakness, and Petrov was going to exploit it until Julian had nothing left but ashes and regret. In the Astoria safe house, Simone met Enzo for the first time. He was exactly what she expected: stocky, alert, the kind of man who'd survived in Julian's world by being smarter and more loyal than anyone else. You're the dancer, Enzo said, sizing her up. I'm Simone. And you're the one who convinced Julian to come to the club that night. Guilty. You going to thank me or curse me for it? Ask me in a month when I know if this was brilliant or catastrophic. Enzo laughed, surprising himself. You're different from the others. They were all scared or trying to change him. You look like you're planning a takeover. I'm planning to survive. Big difference. Yeah. Enzo's expression grew serious. You need to understand something. What happened today, the Russians following you? The threats, that's just the beginning. Petrov's going to escalate. He's going to come at you harder, trying to use you as leverage against Julian. And when that happens, you're going to have to make a choice. Run and save yourself, or fight and risk everything. I already made my choice when I told Julian about Marcus Webb, when I gave him information that could destroy me. I don't run from fights, Enzo. I finish them. Even when the fight might kill you, especially then. Simone met his eyes. I survived Detroit's East Side. I survived killing a man and disappearing for 7 years. I survived building a new life from nothing. You think I'm going to let some Russian mobster scare me away from the first real connection I've had since I was 17? Enzo studied her for a long moment. Then he nodded. Okay, but understand this: the people Julian protects become targets. His last girlfriend was stalked for weeks until she couldn't take the pressure. The one before that got flowers delivered to her office with a note describing how easy it would be to hurt her. This world doesn't play fair, and it doesn't care about civilians. Good thing I'm not a civilian, then. No, Enzo agreed. You're really not. Which is either going to save both of you or destroy you twice as fast. Haven't decided which yet. Simone's phone buzzed. A text from her Detroit contact. 3 targets neutralized. Sent your message loud and clear. Need anything else? She showed the text to Enzo. His eyebrows rose. You hit Petrov's people? Before Julian even responded? I told you. I don't wait for permission when someone threatens me. Or threatens someone I care about. Boss is going to lose his mind when he finds out. Then we'll deal with that when it happens. Simone pocketed her phone. Right now I need to know what we're up against. Tell me about Petrov. Everything. Enzo hesitated, clearly weighing loyalty to Julian against the realization that this woman wasn't going anywhere. Finally, he pulled out a chair and sat across from her. Alexei Petrov, 53 years old. Came to New York from Moscow 12 years ago with connections to the Bratva Russian organized crime. Built his operation in Brighton Beach, primarily focused on smuggling, protection rackets, and money laundering. He's smart, ruthless, and patient. The kind of enemy who'll wait years for the right opportunity. Why does he want Julian's territory? Because Brighton Beach has limits. He's maxed out his potential there. Manhattan offers expansion, and Julian controls the most profitable territories. Petrov's been pushing for 2 years, testing boundaries, making moves. Julian's always pushed back harder. Until now. Until me. Until you, Enzo confirmed. Now Petrov sees an opening. Julian distracted, maybe soft, definitely vulnerable. It's the opportunity he's been waiting for. So what's his next move? If I were him, I'd try to take you. Use you as leverage to force Julian's hand. Make him choose between you and his territory. Enzo's expression was grim. And Julian will choose you. Every time. Which means Petrov gets what he wants and destroys Julian in the process. Unless we don't let that happen. How exactly do you plan to prevent it? Simone smiled, and there was nothing soft about it. By being so much trouble that I'm more liability than leverage. By making sure Petrov regrets ever learning my name. By turning his plan against him so completely that he wishes he'd never looked in Julian's direction. You've got a plan? I've got the beginnings of one. But I need more information. About Petrov's organization, his operations, his vulnerabilities. Everything you can give me. Enzo stared at her. You're serious. Dead serious. Julian's been fighting this battle alone for 2 years. Time he had backup. Real backup, not just soldiers following orders. Someone who can think strategically and hit from angles Petrov won't expect. You're not what I expected. Good. That means I'm not what Petrov expects either. Simone stood. Now take me through everything. Organizational structure, key personnel, revenue streams, all of it. If we're going to win this, I need to understand the battlefield. Enzo made a decision. He pulled out his laptop and opened encrypted files that detailed every aspect of Petrov's organization. And for the next 3 hours, he and Simone strategized like generals preparing for war. By the time Julian arrived at the safe house at midnight, he found them surrounded by diagrams and notes, planning a counteroffensive that would either save his organization or destroy it completely. What the hell is this? Julian asked, staring at the war room they'd created. Simone looked up, eyes bright with strategy and determination. This is me not being a liability. Welcome to the counterattack. Julian looked at Enzo, who shrugged. Don't look at me, boss. She's terrifying. I'm just along for the ride. And despite everything, the threats, the surveillance, the war brewing, Julian laughed, because for the first time in 15 years, he wasn't facing his enemies alone. He'd found a partner who didn't need protecting. She needed weapons. Strategy turned into something deeper. 2 survivors planned their defense while falling for each other. But in the shadows, Petrov's countdown to kidnapping had already begun. The safe house in Astoria became their command center. For 3 days, Julian and Simone barely left, planning strategy and building defenses against Petrov's inevitable attack. But between the tactical discussions and organizational charts, something else was growing. Connection. Real, undeniable connection. On the second night, Julian ordered food from a Thai place he knew in Queens. They ate on the floor, surrounded by maps of Petrov's territories. Surveillance reports spread across the coffee table like a war game. Tell me about the first time, Simone said between bites of pad thai. First time what? First time you killed someone. Julian set down his food. Most people didn't ask that question. Most people didn't want to know the answer. But Simone looked at him with those dark eyes that saw everything and didn't flinch, and Julian found himself answering. I was 19. 6 months after my father died. His underboss, a man named Carmine, who'd been with the family for 20 years, tried to take over. Said I was too young, too inexperienced, too soft. Said the organization needed someone with the strength to hold territory. What happened? I called a meeting with all the captains, told them Carmine was right, I was young and inexperienced, but I wasn't soft. Julian's voice went flat, distant. I pulled out a gun and shot Carmine in the head, right there at the table, in front of everyone. Then I looked at the other captains and asked if anyone else thought I was too soft to lead. What did they do? They swore loyalty. And I spent the next 15 years proving I meant what that moment promised, that I would do anything, sacrifice anyone, cross any line to protect this organization and the people loyal to it. Simone reached across the maps and took his hand. You did what you had to do to survive, to keep your father's legacy alive. That doesn't make you a monster. It makes you a survivor. 9 women disagreed with that assessment. 9 women never had to make life or death decisions, never had to choose between their survival and their morality. They lived in a world where violence is theoretical, where consequences are abstract. We don't have that luxury. Julian squeezed her hand. You really don't judge this. Don't judge me. How can I judge you when I did the same thing? Marcus Webb tried to take from me, so I took everything from him first. You had someone trying to steal your father's empire, so you eliminated the threat. Different circumstances, same survival math. They fell silent, eating and planning and existing in the strange intimacy of shared darkness. Around midnight, Enzo left to coordinate security details across Julian's organization. The safe house felt smaller with just the 2 of them, the air heavier with unspoken tension. "I need to tell you something," Simone said, setting aside her food. "About what happened with Petrov's people. I know you had them hit." She looked surprised. "How?" Enzo told me. "Message about Detroit. 3 men beaten nearly to death." "Doesn't take a genius to connect those dots." Julian studied her. "You called your crew without asking me first." "I did." "Why?" "Because waiting for permission gets you killed. Because I saw a threat and neutralized it. Because I'm not some civilian you need to protect. I'm someone who protects herself and anyone she cares about." Simone met his eyes. "Are you angry?" Julian should have been. Should have felt his authority challenged, his control threatened. In his world, people didn't make moves without approval. They didn't take initiative that could start wars. But looking at Simone fierce and unapologetic, a woman who'd survived by being proactive rather than reactive, he felt something else entirely. Pride. Respect. And a desire so intense it took his breath away. "No," he said. "I'm not angry. I'm impressed. And I'm realizing that you're not just someone who understands my world. You're someone who can operate in it independently. That's rare. That's valuable." "That's dangerous," Simone countered. "For both of us. Because if I'm operating independently, I can make mistakes that affect your organization. I can start conflicts you didn't authorize. I can become a loose cannon that does more harm than good. So what do you suggest?" "Partnership. Real partnership. Not you protecting me and making decisions for me, but us operating as equals. I bring my perspective and my resources. You bring yours. We make decisions together, and we both live with the consequences." Julian stood and crossed the room to her. Simone rose to meet him, and the space between them felt charged with electricity. "Equal partners," he said. "Equal partners, she." "Continue." 9:41 a.m. "Confirmed." Julian kissed her then, hard and claiming, and Simone kissed him back with equal intensity. When they broke apart, both breathing hard, the maps and plans and strategic discussions didn't matter anymore. All that mattered was this: 2 people who'd survived alone finally finding someone who matched their darkness. The next morning, Julian's phone exploded with calls. Enzo first, then his captains, then his lawyer, everyone with the same message. The FBI had raided 3 of his legitimate businesses simultaneously. Not his criminal operations, those were too well hidden. But the fronts, the clean businesses that laundered money and provided cover. Julian answered Enzo's call. "Talk." Coordinated raids. They hit the shipping company, the restaurant supply business, and the construction firm. Federal agents, warrants, the whole show. They're seizing records, computers, everything. Damage? Minimal. The businesses are clean enough to pass inspection. But boss, the timing isn't coincidental. Someone tipped the feds. Julian looked at Simone, who was already pulling up news coverage on her laptop. "Petrov. Has to be. He can't attack us directly, so he's using the feds as a weapon. Classic move, let the government do your dirty work while you maintain plausible deniability. Where are we vulnerable? Nowhere immediate. But if they dig deep enough, long enough, they might find connections. And even if they don't, the disruption costs us time and money. Petrov knows this." Simone held up her laptop, showing a news article. "Federal agents execute raids on multiple Moretti-connected businesses." The article was light on details but heavy on implications, painting Julian as a mob boss finally facing justice. "We need to respond," Simone said, "but not the way Petrov expects." "What are you thinking?" "He wants you distracted. Wants you scrambling to deal with federal pressure while he makes moves on your territory. So we don't scramble. We stay calm, handle the legal issues through proper channels, and focus on offense instead of defense." Julian raised an eyebrow. "Offense?" "Petrov has vulnerabilities. Business operations that can't survive scrutiny. We find those operations and we apply pressure. Not through violence, that's what he's prepared for. Through the same weapon he's using against you. The law." Enzo's voice came through the phone. "You want to tip the feds to Petrov's operations? Not tip them. Guide them. Anonymous information about Russian smuggling operations, money laundering, tax evasion. Things that will trigger their interest without being obviously connected to us." Simone's eyes were bright with strategy. "Petrov thinks he can use the government as a weapon? Let's show him that blade cuts both ways." Julian felt something shift in his chest. This woman, this dancer he'd met 5 days ago, was thinking 3 moves ahead, turning Petrov's attack into an opportunity. "Do it," he said to Enzo. "Work with Simone. Whatever information she needs, get it for her. Boss, are you sure about this? I've never been more sure of anything. He ended the call and pulled Simone close. You're remarkable. I'm a survivor, and I've spent 7 years studying how systems work, how power operates, how to move through the world without leaving tracks. Petrov thinks I'm just some dancer you're sleeping with. He's about to learn I'm so much more than that. They spent the day strategizing. Simone mapped out Petrov's known operations, the restaurants in Brighton Beach that laundered money, the import-export business that smuggled goods, the construction company that employed undocumented workers and skimmed payroll. Every operation had federal violations hidden in plain sight. The key is making it look organic, Simone explained to Enzo when he arrived with files. The feds can't think they're being used. They have to believe they discovered this themselves. So we create breadcrumbs, anonymous tips to different agencies. IRS gets information about tax evasion. Immigration gets details about undocumented workers. Customs gets evidence of smuggling. Each agency thinks they're running independent investigations. And when they all converge on Petrov? Enzo asked. He gets buried under so much legal scrutiny that he has to pull back from Manhattan just to survive. His resources get diverted to lawyers and bribes and damage control. He goes from hunter to hunted. Simone smiled. And we never fire a single shot. Julian watched her work, watched her mind dissect problems and construct solutions with surgical precision. This wasn't the desperate hope he'd felt with previous relationships. This was something solid, something real. Respect mixed with desire, mixed with the certainty that he'd found someone extraordinary. I need to tell you something, he said when Enzo left to implement the plan. What? What? I'm falling for you. Fast and hard and in ways that terrify me. Because everyone I've ever cared about becomes a target. Everyone I love gets hurt. Julian took her hands. And I already care about you too much to lose you. Simone's expression softened. I'm falling for you too. And I'm terrified for the same reasons. But Julian, we can't let fear stop us from living. We can't let people like Petrov dictate whether we get to be happy. If we do that, they've already won. So what do? We fight, together. And we trust that two people who've survived everything the world threw at them separately can survive even more together. Julian kissed her, slower this time, deeper. And for the first time in 15 years, he let himself believe that maybe, possibly, he could have both power and love, empire and connection, survival and happiness. But neither of them knew that outside the safe house, Petrov's extraction team was already in position, studying patterns, identifying vulnerabilities, waiting for the perfect window. The countdown had begun. Simone had 3 days of relative safety left. And then everything would explode into violence that would test whether their partnership could survive the fire. On the third night, Julian took Simone to Renzo's again. The same restaurant where they'd had their first real dinner, where they'd started building something neither had thought possible. But this time was different. This time they weren't strangers trying to decide if their darkness was compatible. This time they were partners planning a future while knowing that future might be measured in days rather than years. Tell me something you've never told anyone, Julian said over dessert. Like what? Like what you want, really want. If you could have anything, if Petrov didn't exist, and the FBI wasn't a threat, and we could just be, what would that look like? Simone was quiet for a long moment. I want to stop running. I've been running for 7 years from Detroit, from Marcus Webb's ghost, from who I used to be. I want to exist in one place with one name, and not constantly look over my shoulder waiting for my past to catch up. What else? I want to finish my nursing degree. Started it in Detroit before everything went wrong. Always planned to go back, but every time I settle somewhere new, it feels too risky to create an official record. She smiled sadly. Stupid, right? I'm sitting here planning criminal strategy with a mob boss. But what I really want is to be a nurse. It's not stupid, it's human. Julian reached across the table. What if I could make that happen? Get you a clean identity, solid enough to withstand background checks. You could finish your degree, practice nursing, have the life you wanted before everything went wrong. That's impossible. No, it's just expensive and complicated. But I have resources, connections, people who specialize in creating identities that can pass any scrutiny. Julian squeezed her hand. I want to give you that, Simone. Want to give you the chance to stop running. Tears welled in her eyes. Why would you do that? Because I love you. And because you deserve to have dreams that don't include looking over your shoulder. Simone wiped her eyes, smudging her makeup. I love you too, and I want to believe we can have this. But Julian, Petrov isn't going to stop. He's going to escalate, and when he does, we'll be ready. Together. They left the restaurant holding hands, neither of them noticing the black van parked across the street, neither seeing the camera documenting their every movement, neither aware that 3 men were inside, running through checklists and confirming extraction protocols. The window had arrived. Tomorrow morning, when Simone left the safe house to return to her apartment for clothes and personal items, that brief moment of vulnerability when she'd be exposed, when Julian's security detail would be spread thin, covering multiple locations, that's when they'd take her. Julian walked Simone to the cab, kissing her goodnight with a promise to see her tomorrow. She rode back to the safe house, feeling lighter than she had in years, believing that maybe, possibly, she and Julian could survive the storm they'd created. She fell asleep in the guest bedroom at 2 a.m., phone charging on the nightstand. Knife under her pillow out of habit. She dreamed of nursing school and apartments that didn't require fake names, and a future where her past stayed buried. She had no idea that 6 blocks away, 3 men were loading equipment into a van and finalizing plans to ruin everything. The extraction was scheduled for 9 a.m. Simone had 7 hours of peace left. Morning came with violence. Petrov made his move. But he'd underestimated one critical factor. Simone Carter didn't need rescuing. She needed revenge. Simone woke at 8:15 a.m. to her phone vibrating. Detroit number, Kiana. Someone's been asking questions, Kiana said without preamble. Russian guy, heavy accent, flashing money around. Wants to know about you. About what happened with Marcus. About where you went afterward. Simone sat up, instantly alert. When? 2 days ago. I didn't call sooner because I thought it was just one guy being nosy. But this morning, one of Marcus's old crew reached out, said Russians came by his garage, asking the same questions. This isn't random, Simone. Someone's building a file on you. Petrov. Who? The man I warned you about. He's doing exactly what I was afraid of, digging into my past, looking for leverage. Simone stood and started dressing. What did you tell them? Nothing. Played dumb. Said I barely knew you. Hadn't heard from you in years. But Simone, if they're asking in Detroit, they probably already know most of it. They're just confirming details. Okay. Thank you for the warning. Be careful. These people sound serious. They are. But so am I. Simone ended the call and immediately texted Julian. Petrov's people are in Detroit asking about me. He's building a case. The response came quickly. Don't leave the safe house. I'm sending additional security. I need to go to my apartment. Get clothes, personal items. Can't hide forever. Not today. Too risky. Simone felt frustration rise. She understood Julian's protectiveness, but she wasn't going to hide in a safe house while Petrov built a profile on her past. Wasn't going to be the damsel waiting to be saved. I'm going. With or without your security detail. Your choice. Her phone rang. Julian, voice tight with tension. You can't go alone. I'm not helpless. I never said you were. But Petrov is escalating and you're exposed. Please, Simone, just wait one more day. Let me position people properly. Simone wanted to argue, but she heard something in Julian's voice that gave her pause, not just concern, but fear. Real fear. The emotion of someone who'd already lost people and couldn't survive losing another. Okay, she said. One more day. But tomorrow I'm going, and we're doing this on my terms. I'm not spending the rest of my life in hiding. Tomorrow, I promise. They ended the call just as Enzo knocked on the bedroom door. Boss wants me to review security protocols with you. Make sure you know what to do if something happens. I'm not leaving the safe house today. Good. But we're reviewing protocols anyway. Humor me. They spent the next hour going through emergency procedures, exit routes, panic codes, what to do if the safe house was compromised. Enzo was thorough, professional, and clearly taking this more seriously than usual. You think something's coming, Simone said. Not a question. I think Petrov's been too quiet. 3 days since we hit his people. And no response? That's not like him. He's planning something big. So what do? We stay alert. Trust our instincts. And we remember that in this world, paranoia keeps you alive. At 8:47 a.m., the safe house phone rang. Enzo answered, his expression changing from alert to alarmed. Boss, we have a situation. One of our surveillance teams just spotted a tactical van circling the block. Professional equipment. 3 men inside, checking sightlines to the safe house. Julian's voice came through the speaker. Get her out. Now. Copy that. Enzo turned to Simone. We're leaving. Grab anything you need, but move fast. Simone didn't waste time with questions. She grabbed her bag, slipped on shoes, and followed Enzo to the back entrance. 2 guards materialized from rooms she hadn't known they were occupying, flanking them with weapons drawn. Cars in the underground garage, Enzo said. We go out the back, through the service corridor, straight to the vehicle. No stops, no hesitation. Understand? Simone nodded, her heart hammering. This was real. The theoretical danger had become immediate threat. They moved fast through the building's service areas, the kind of hallways civilians never saw. Behind them, Simone heard the front door explode inward with a massive crash. Shouts in Russian. Gunfire. Faster, Enzo urged. They burst into the underground garage. A black SUV waited with the engine running, a driver behind the wheel. The guards shepherded Simone toward the vehicle, Enzo scanning for threats. Then the world exploded. A van screeched into the garage from the street entrance, cutting off their escape route. Doors flew open. 4 men emerged with weapons raised, not guns, Simone noticed, but something else. Tranquilizer rifles. They wanted her alive. Down! Enzo shoved Simone behind a concrete pillar as darts hissed through the air. 1 guard dropped, tranquilized. The driver slumped over the steering wheel. Enzo returned fire with live ammunition, forcing the Russians to take cover behind their van. But they were outnumbered and outgunned. We need to move, Enzo said. Can't stay here. Where? Out. Any direction. Just out. They ran, staying low, using parked cars as cover. The Russians pursued, still firing tranquilizer darts, still trying to take Simone alive. 1 dart passed so close to her face she felt the air displacement. Enzo returned fire again, dropping 1 Russian. But more were coming. Simone could hear footsteps. Multiple people, coordinated movements. This was an extraction team. Professional, prepared. They burst through a door marked emergency exit only and into an alley. The morning sun was blinding after the dim garage. Enzo pulled Simone behind a dumpster, breathing hard, reloading his weapon. Call Julian, he said. Tell him we're compromised, heading east on foot. Simone fumbled for her phone, but before she could dial, Enzo stiffened. A red dot appeared on his chest. Laser sight. Don't, a voice said from above. Russian accent. Calm, professional. Simone looked up. On the fire escape, a man aimed a rifle at Enzo's head. Not a tranquilizer this time. Real bullets for real killing. Drop the weapon, the Russian said. Or I drop you and take her anyway. Enzo looked at Simone, and she saw the calculation in his eyes. Could he shoot the sniper before the sniper shot him? Maybe, probably not. He lowered his weapon. Good. Now kick it away. Enzo complied. The Russian descended the fire escape, while 2 more men emerged from the alley entrance behind them, blocking escape. They were surrounded. The Russian from the fire escape approached, keeping his rifle trained on Enzo. He was older, maybe 50, with the lean efficiency of someone who'd spent decades in violent professions. Simone Carter, he said. Mr. Petrov would like to meet you. Tell Mr. Petrov to fuck himself. The Russian smiled. I admire spirit, but this can go 2 ways. You cooperate, and your friend lives. You resist, and he dies. Choose now. Simone looked at Enzo, who gave a nearly imperceptible shake of his head. Don't do it. Don't surrender. But Simone wasn't looking at a stranger or a bodyguard. She was looking at Julian's best friend, his underboss, the man who'd brought them together in the first place, the man who'd die to protect her because Julian cared about her. Okay, she said. I'll go. Simone, Enzo started. It's fine. I'll be fine. The lie tasted bitter on her tongue. They zip-tied her wrists and led her to the van. As they drove away, Simone watched through the rear window as Enzo pulled out his phone, already calling Julian with news that would destroy him. The woman he loved had been taken, and it was exactly the scenario he'd feared since the moment they met. In his penthouse, Julian answered Enzo's call and felt his world collapse. They took her, boss. Full extraction team, professionals. We were outnumbered. I'm sorry. I'm so fucking sorry. Julian's vision tunneled. The penthouse spun. Every fear, every nightmare, Every reason he'd stayed alone for years, all of it crystallizing into one devastating reality. Simone was gone. Petrov had her. Where? His voice was ice. Unknown. Van had no plates, no identifying marks. They were ghosts. Find her. Use every resource. Call in every favor. I want her location in the next hour. Boss. 1 hour, Enzo. Or I start burning Brighton Beach to the ground until Petrov surfaces. He ended the call and stood in his penthouse, 30 stories above a city that suddenly felt like a prison. 9 women had run from him because they couldn't handle his darkness, couldn't survive his world. And the one woman brave enough to stay had been taken because of it. His father's voice echoed, "Love makes you weak." But as Julian stood there, rage and fear and determination crystallizing into something cold and focused, he realized his father had been wrong about that too. Love didn't make him weak. It made him absolutely fucking terrifying, because now he had something to fight for besides survival. Now he had a reason to unleash every bit of violence he'd spent 15 years perfecting. Petrov wanted a war. He was about to learn what the Butcher of Brooklyn looked like when he stopped playing defensive. Julian made 3 calls. First to his captains, ordering them to mobilize every soldier. Second to his connections in the NYPD, demanding information on Russian operations. Third to someone whose number he'd sworn never to use except in emergencies. "I need your services," Julian said when the call connected. "Target is Alexei Petrov. I want him found, his operations mapped, and every person connected to him identified. Timeline is immediate. This will cost you," the voice on the other end said. "I don't care about cost. I care about results. Consider it done." Julian hung up and allowed himself one moment of absolute terror. One moment where he imagined what Petrov might do to Simone. How he might hurt her, use her, break her. Then he locked that fear away and became the monster everyone feared. Because Simone needed the butcher, not the man. She needed the reputation, the violence, the absolute ruthlessness that made enemies disappear. And Julian was going to give her exactly that. Meanwhile, in a warehouse in Red Hook, Simone was zip-tied to a chair in an empty room. The Russians had been efficient, stripping her of phone, knife, anything she could use as a weapon. But they'd made one critical mistake. They'd left her conscious. The Russian from the fire escape, the leader sat across from her in a metal chair, smoking a cigarette. "Mr. Petrov will be here soon. He wants to speak with you personally. I'm honored. You should be afraid. I've been afraid before. It didn't stick." The Russian studied her with professional interest. "You are not what I expected. Most civilians break when we take them. Cry, beg, offer anything for release. You sit there like you're waiting for a bus. That's because I'm not a civilian, and I'm not waiting for rescue." Simone met his eyes. "I'm waiting for revenge." He laughed, genuinely amused. "You have courage. Stupid courage, but courage nonetheless." The door opened. Alexei Petrov entered wearing an expensive suit and carrying himself with the confidence of someone who'd won. He dismissed the Russian with a gesture and pulled the chair closer to Simone. "Finally," he said in accented English, "the famous dancer who turned down millionaires and captured the butcher's heart. You must be Petrov. Heard you're a coward who hides behind kidnapping women because you can't beat Julian in a fair fight." Petrov's smile didn't falter. "Fair fights are for losers and dead men. I prefer strategies that work. Like using me as leverage?" "Exactly like that. You see, Moretti has built a reputation on being untouchable, fearless. The man who cares about nothing except his organization. But now he cares about you, which means he has a weakness I can exploit. You think he'll trade territory for me? I think he'll trade everything for you. His operations, his influence, his power, all of it. Because the alternative is watching you die slowly while he listens on the phone." Simone felt cold fury settle into her bones. "You've made a mistake, have I? You've assumed I'm helpless, that Julian needs to save me, that I'm the damsel in this story." Simone leaned forward as much as the zip ties allowed. "But I'm not. I'm the woman who killed a man with a tire iron when I was 17. I'm the woman who disappeared for 7 years and built a new life from nothing. I'm the woman who has her own crew, her own resources, her own capacity for violence. And yet here you sit, tied to a chair, helpless. For now," Petrov laughed. "I almost like you. Such spirit, such strength. It's a shame you chose Moretti. In different circumstances, you could have been useful to me. In different circumstances, I would have killed you already." Big words from a woman in zip ties. Petrov stood and walked to the door. I'm going to make Moretti an offer. Territory in exchange for your life. He'll refuse at first, pride demands it. But after I send him a recording of you screaming, he'll reconsider. They always do. Julian will come for me. I'm counting on it. I have 50 men surrounding this warehouse. The moment he arrives, the moment he shows that he's willing to sacrifice everything for you, I've won. Either he surrenders his organization to save you, or he dies trying. Either outcome works for me. Petrov left, locking the door behind him. Simone sat alone in the empty room, bound to a chair, exactly as helpless as Petrov thought. Except for one thing. Petrov had been so focused on Julian, so certain that the Butcher of Brooklyn would mount a rescue operation, that he'd forgotten about Simone's own connections, her own crew, her own resources. The text she'd sent from the safe house before they fled, the one to her Detroit contacts that simply said, Red Hook Warehouse District, possible trouble, had already been received. And her crew didn't wait for permission or detailed instructions. They saw trouble. They responded. Period. So while Petrov prepared for Julian's assault from one direction, he'd left himself completely exposed to the attack coming from another. Simone smiled in the darkness. She wasn't waiting for rescue. She was waiting for backup. 2 rescue operations converged on one warehouse. Julian brought his army. Simone's crew brought Detroit's fury. Petrov was about to learn that underestimating either of them was fatal. 6 blocks from the warehouse, Julian reviewed the tactical plan with his captains. 50 of his best soldiers. Divided into teams, each with specific objectives. Breach team, suppression team, extraction team. Military precision applied to criminal warfare. Petrov will be expecting this, Enzo said, studying the warehouse blueprint. He took her to draw you out. This is a trap. I know, and you're walking into it anyway. I'm not walking. I'm charging. Julian's voice was cold steel. Petrov thinks he understands my limits, thinks he can predict my moves. He's about to learn he's wrong about both. Boss, if we hit this warehouse with full force, people die. A lot of people, including possibly Simone. Then we make sure she's secured first. Extraction team goes in through the roof, while breach team creates distraction. We hit them fast, hard, and from multiple angles. Petrov's people won't know which threat to respond to first. It was a good plan. Brutal, but good. What Julian didn't know was that at that exact moment, 5 blocks away in a different direction, 6 people from Detroit were implementing their own tactical approach. They'd been watching the warehouse for 3 hours, mapping guard positions, identifying weak points, waiting for the right moment. Deshawn, the crew leader and former Army Ranger, spoke into his comm. Keisha, what do we have? Keisha, their surveillance specialist, responded from a rooftop across the street. I count 20 guards outside, rotating shifts every 30 minutes. Heavy weapons visible, definitely expecting company, but they're all watching the main approaches, street level, obvious entry points. They're not watching the drainage system. The what? This warehouse is built over an old industrial drainage system. Tunnels run underneath, connect to the building's lower level. I've got schematics from the city database. We can breach from below, come up inside their perimeter, extract Simone before anyone knows we're there. That's insane. That's why it'll work. Deshawn looked at his crew, Marcus, Tanya, Jamal, Keisha, and himself. 5 people against an organization of professionals. Terrible odds, but they'd survived worse in Detroit. Okay, he said. Marcus, you're on Overwatch. Find a position with clear sightlines. Cover our extraction. Tanya, Jamal, you're with me on the breach. Keisha, guide us through those tunnels and monitor communications. We hear sirens. We hear Julian Moretti's people moving in. We adapt. Understood? Everyone nodded. And remember, Simone keeps us out of prison and kept us alive when we had nothing. We don't leave without her. Period. They moved into position. Professionals operating with the kind of coordination that came from years of survival in a city that tried to kill them. The drainage tunnel entrance was hidden behind a chain-link fence 3 blocks from the warehouse. Bolt cutters made quick work of the lock. Inside, the tunnels were dark, damp, and smelled like decades of industrial runoff. They moved through with tactical lights and determination, Keisha's voice in their ears directing them through the maze. Straight 50 meters, then right at the junction. That'll put you under the warehouse's east wing. There's an access ladder that leads to the loading dock area. They followed her directions, moving in silence, weapons ready. Above them, Petrov's guards had no idea death was approaching from below. Meanwhile, Julian's teams moved into position. The breach team assembled at the main entrance, explosive charges ready. The suppression team flanked with weapons that would provide covering fire. The extraction team climbed to the roof, prepared to rappel down to the holding area where intelligence suggested Simone was being kept. "On my mark," Julian said into his comm. He was in the command vehicle 2 blocks away, every instinct screaming at him to be in the breach personally. But Enzo had convinced him that a living boss was more useful than a dead one. 3, 2, 1, mark. The warehouse reduces the word count to 1,000, 200 each from Chapter 6. 10:56 p.m. 2 rescue operations converged on one warehouse. Julian brought his army. Simone's crew brought Detroit's fury. Petrov was about to learn that underestimating either of them was fatal. 6 blocks from the warehouse, Julian reviewed the tactical plan with his captains. 50 soldiers, divided into teams, breach, suppression, extraction, military precision applied to criminal warfare. Petrov expects this, Enzo said, studying blueprints. He took her to draw you out. This is a trap. I know, and you're walking into it anyway. I'm not walking. I'm charging. Julian's voice was ice. Petrov thinks he understands my limits. He's about to learn he's wrong. What Julian didn't know, 5 blocks away, 6 people from Detroit were implementing their own plan. Deshawn, former Army Ranger, led Simone's crew. They'd watched the warehouse for hours, mapping guards, finding weaknesses. "Keisha, what do we have?" Deshawn spoke into his comm. 20 guards outside, rotating every 30 minutes. Heavy weapons, expecting company. But they're watching street level, not watching the drainage system underneath. The what? Old industrial tunnels run under the warehouse. We can breach from below, extract Simone before anyone knows we're there. That's insane. That's why it'll work. Deshawn looked at his crew. 5 people against an organization. Terrible odds. But they'd survived worse in Detroit. Marcus, overwatch. Tanya, Jamal, with me on breach. Keisha, guide us through tunnels and monitor communications. We don't leave without her. Period. They moved to a drainage entrance hidden behind a fence 3 blocks away. Bolt cutters opened the lock. Inside, tunnels were dark, damp, smelling of decades of industrial runoff. They moved with tactical lights, Keisha's voice directing them. Straight 50 meters, right at the junction. That puts you under the warehouse's east wing. Above them, Petrov's guards had no idea death approached from below. Julian's teams moved into position simultaneously. Breach team at the main entrance with explosive charges. Suppression team flanking with covering fire weapons. Extraction team climbing to the roof, prepared to rappel down to where Simone was held. "On my mark," Julian said into his comm from the command vehicle 2 blocks away. Every instinct screamed to be in the breach personally, but Enzo had convinced him a living boss was more useful than a dead one. 3, 2, 1, mark. The warehouse exploded into chaos. Julian's breach team blew the main entrance, doors flying inward in a shower of steel and smoke. Suppression team opened fire, pinning Petrov's guards behind cover. On the roof, extraction team rappelled down through skylights. In the tunnels below, Deshawn's crew heard the explosions and accelerated. "That's our distraction. Move!" They burst through an access hatch into the warehouse's lower level. Empty loading dock, minimal security. Everyone had rushed to respond to Julian's frontal assault. "Keisha, where's Simone?" "2nd floor, east corner. You've got clear passage, all guards responding to the main breach." They moved fast, weapons ready, clearing corners with practiced efficiency. Detroit had taught them to survive. Simone had given them purpose beyond survival. Upstairs, Simone heard the explosions and smiled in the darkness. Julian had come. Exactly as Petrov predicted. But her smile widened, knowing something Petrov didn't. She had 2 rescue operations converging. The Russian guard outside her door ran toward the noise, leaving her momentarily alone. Simone worked her wrists against the zip ties, using a technique she'd learned years ago. The plastic bit into her skin, drawing blood, but she felt it give slightly. Her door burst open. Not Russian guards, not Julian's soldiers. Deshawn, grinning like he'd just won the lottery. "Miss me? Took you long enough." He cut her zip ties with a tactical knife. "Can you walk? I can run. Let's move." They emerged into the hallway as Julian's extraction team came down the stairs from above. Both groups froze, weapons raised, neither recognizing the other. "Hold fire!" Simone shouted. "They're with me." Julian's team leader, a man named Dominic, lowered his weapon cautiously. You're the Detroit crew, and you're Moretti's people, Deshawn responded. We doing this together or separately? Together. We've got 50 Russians between us and exit. Then let's even those odds. They moved as a combined force, Simone in the center, both crews protecting her from different angles. The warehouse had become a war zone, gunfire echoing, smoke filling corridors, Russian guards trying to mount coordinated defense while being attacked from multiple directions. In the command vehicle, Enzo relayed information to Julian. Boss, extraction team has her, but there's another team with them looks like her Detroit people. Julian felt something shift in his chest. She'd called her own backup, hadn't waited for rescue, had activated her own resources while he was planning his assault. Support them, whatever they need. The combined teams fought through the warehouse, leaving bodies and chaos behind them. Petrov's guards were professionals, but they were prepared for one assault, not two simultaneous operations from different angles with different tactics. They burst through a side exit into an alley, where vehicles waited Julian's SUVs on one side, a Detroit crew van on the other. We'll take her from here, Dominic said to Deshawn. Like hell, Deshawn responded. We came for her. We're leaving with her. Gentlemen, Simone interrupted. I'm standing right here, and I'm going with Julian. But thank you. She turned to Deshawn and pulled him into a brief, fierce hug. Thank you for coming. For always coming when I need you. Always, he said simply. Your family. Simone climbed into Julian's SUV as sirens wailed in the distance. The Detroit crew disappeared into their van, ghosts returning to shadows. Julian's teams loaded up, leaving the warehouse smoking behind them. They reunited at the Astoria safe house. Julian pulled Simone into his arms the moment she walked through the door, holding her like he'd never let go. I'm okay, she whispered against his chest. You called your crew without telling me. I texted them before the extraction. Just in case. Turns out, in case happened. Julian pulled back to look at her. You planned your own rescue. I planned backup. You were plan A, they were plan B. Together you were unstoppable. She smiled. That's what partnership means. Multiple angles, multiple resources, complete trust. Enzo cleared his throat from the doorway. Boss, we have a problem. Petrov got away. Warehouse is burning, but he wasn't there. He was never there, Simone said. He set this up to trap you, but he's too smart to be anywhere near when it went down. He's probably in Brighton Beach right now, regrouping. Then we go to Brighton Beach, Julian said. We end this. No, Simone's voice was firm. We don't give him another chance to predict our moves. We change the game entirely. How? Remember the federal strategy I mentioned? Anonymous tips about his operations? Time to implement it. But bigger. We don't just tip the feds, we tip everyone. FBI, IRS, immigration, customs, local police. We create so much heat that Petrov has to choose between coming after us or surviving the legal onslaught. Enzo pulled up a laptop. I've got files ready. Just need authorization to send. Do it, Julian said. All of it. Bury him. Over the next hour, carefully compiled evidence went to multiple agencies. Tax evasion to the IRS, smuggling to customs, immigration violations to ICE, RICO predicate acts to the FBI. Each tip anonymous, each one backed by documentation that would force investigations. By morning, Petrov would wake up to federal agents executing search warrants across all his operations. His lawyers would be overwhelmed. His resources would be diverted to legal defense instead of territorial expansion. He wanted a war, Simone said, watching the tips go out. We're giving him one, just not the kind he expected. Julian pulled her close. You saved yourself today. Called your own backup, planned your own extraction. I came charging in like you needed rescuing, but you'd already handled it. We handled it together. Your assault gave my crew the distraction they needed. My crew's breach gave your team a second angle. That's partnership. Equal partners. Equal partners. They spent the night planning next moves, anticipating Petrov's responses, building strategies that utilized both their resources, Julian's organization and Simone's crew, working in coordination rather than parallel. By dawn, reports came in. Federal agents had raided 6 Petrov properties. Brighton Beach was crawling with law enforcement. Petrov himself had gone dark, probably meeting with lawyers. He's done, Enzo said, reviewing the news. Even if he beats the charges, the scrutiny ends his expansion plans. He'll be lucky to hold what he has. Good, Julian said. Let that be a lesson to anyone else who thinks my weaknesses are exploitable. Simone looked at him. I'm not your weakness. No, Julian agreed, kissing her forehead. You're my strength, and that's so much more dangerous. The war moved from streets to strategy. Petrov demanded a meeting. Julian and Simone walked in as partners. What Petrov didn't know, they'd already won. 3 days after the warehouse assault, Petrov requested a meeting, neutral ground, just talk, no violence. The message came through intermediaries, carefully worded, almost respectful. It's a trap, Enzo said immediately. Of course it's a trap, Julian responded. But we're going anyway. Why? Because Petrov needs to see what he's up against. Needs to understand that taking Simone didn't break me, it made me more dangerous. And he needs to meet her properly. Let her show him exactly why underestimating her was his biggest mistake. Simone entered the room, dressed in black, looking every inch the Queen Petrov's people had started calling her in whispered conversations. When's the meeting? Tomorrow night. Warehouse on the waterfront. Neutral territory. How many people can we bring? He said, minimal security. Probably means he'll have 50 guys hidden. Then we bring our own 50. Plus my Detroit crew. Make it clear we're not playing by his rules anymore. Julian smiled. You want to walk into a meeting with an army? I want to walk in as your equal. Which means I bring my people, you bring yours. And Petrov learns that threatening me means threatening 2 organizations, not 1. The next night, they arrived at the warehouse in separate vehicles but as a united front. Julian's soldiers flanked the entrance. Simone's Detroit crew positioned on surrounding rooftops. When they walked through the door together, hand in hand, it sent a message impossible to miss. Inside, Petrov waited with his own security. He'd aged in the past week, stress etching lines deeper, eyes carrying the weight of federal investigations and failed plans. When he saw Simone, walking free and unafraid beside Julian, something flickered across his face. Respect, grudging, but real. Miss Carter, Petrov said in accented English. You are more formidable than I expected. Everyone makes that mistake once, Simone replied. Smart people don't make it twice. They sat at a table, guards from both sides watching each other with open hostility. The tension was thick enough to taste. I underestimated you both, Petrov admitted. I thought Moretti would be weak because of you. Instead, you made him stronger. 2 organizations instead of 1. 2 strategic minds instead of 1. Is there a point to this? Julian asked. The point is negotiation. I want Manhattan. You want me to stop coming after your woman. Perhaps we can find middle ground. Petrov slid a folder across the table. Territory maps, showing proposed divisions. Nearly half of Julian's operations, everything north of 96th Street, offered in exchange for peace. You're insane, Julian said flatly. I'm practical. The federal investigations will bury me unless I can prove their harassment. Best way to do that is through expansion show. I'm legitimate businessman being targeted for my success. I need those territories, Moretti. Name your price. There is no price. Those territories are mine. They stay mine. Simone put her hand on Julian's arm. May I? Julian nodded, curious. Simone pulled out her phone and placed it on the table. She pressed play on a video. The screen showed Petrov meeting with FBI agents in a parking garage. Audio crystal clear. We can't touch Moretti legally, an agent said. But if you destabilize his organization from within, we'll look the other way on your operations for 2 years. Petrov's face went pale. Your expansion into Manhattan? Simone said pleasantly. It's a federal sting operation. You're creating chaos so the FBI can sweep in and take everyone down. But here's the thing. Alexei, my people have been watching you for a week. We have video of 4 different meetings with federal agents. We have recordings of phone calls. We have everything. That's impossible. My crew is very good at what they do. Simone smiled without warmth. So here's our counteroffer. You withdraw all claims to Manhattan territory. You go back to Brighton Beach and stay there. In exchange, we don't send this video to every crime family in New York. Because once they see you're working with the feds, you're a dead man walking. The room went dead silent. Petrov's guards shifted uncomfortably, looking at their boss with new suspicion. In their world, cooperating with federal agents was a death sentence. You'd trust a dancer over me? Petrov asked Julian. Someone you've known for weeks? I trust someone who got results, Julian said coldly. And she's right. The second this video goes public, every family in the city will be gunning for you. You'll be dead within a week, if you're lucky. Petrov stood slowly, his guards tensing. This isn't over. Yes, Simone said quietly. It is. Because if anything happens to Julian, to me, or to anyone in our organizations, that video drops automatically. Dead man's switch. If we don't check in every 12 hours, everything goes public. So you're going to walk out of here and disappear from Manhattan. Forever. For a long moment, Petrov just stared at them. Two people who should have been easy targets, a crime boss distracted by love. A dancer with no real power had outmaneuvered him completely. Finally, he smiled, bitter and defeated. The butcher found himself a queen. Congratulations, Moretti. She's more ruthless than you are. He left with his guards, the warehouse emptying until just Julian, Simone, and their combined crews remained. You've had surveillance on him all week? Julian asked. Since the warehouse assault. I called my crew back, told them to shadow Petrov's every move. When they discovered the FBI meetings, I knew we had him. Julian pulled her close. You just saved my organization and probably my life. I saved our future, Simone corrected. Because I meant what I said. We're partners, equal partners. What threatens you threatens me. What protects you protects me. Equal partners, Julian agreed. Enzo approached, grinning. Boss, she's impressive. Terrifying, but impressive. She's everything, Julian said simply. The Detroit crew prepared to return home, their job complete. Deshawn approached Simone one last time. You good here? Really good? I'm better than I've been in 7 years, Simone said honestly. I found someone who understands what it took to survive. Who doesn't judge the violence I needed to stay alive. He treats you wrong, we come back. All of us. I know. That's why I can stay. Because I'm not trapped. I'm choosing this. They left in their van, disappearing back to Detroit, leaving Simone with Julian, and a future that suddenly felt possible instead of dangerous. 3 months transformed everything. The dancer became a queen. The lonely boss found his equal. Together, they built something unprecedented. A partnership that made them unstoppable. 3 months after Petrov's defeat, Manhattan's underworld had settled into a new reality. Julian Moretti controlled his territories with an iron grip, but now he had a partner whose intelligence network rivaled his enforcement capabilities. Simone had quit dancing at the Obsidian Lounge, walking off that stage for the last time to standing ovation from customers who didn't know they'd just watched history. She'd built something more valuable than performance art. She'd built an information empire. Using her connections from the Obsidian Lounge, she'd recruited dancers, bartenders, servers, the invisible people who moved through high society and criminal underworld alike, seeing everything, remembered by no one. They fed her information about deals being discussed in VIP sections, about politicians' dirty secrets, about business mergers before they hit the news. Simone took that information and weaponized it. She sold intelligence to Julian's organization, but also to select other buyers, always careful never to compromise Julian's interests, but building her own reputation, her own wealth, her own power. You're a natural at this, Julian said one morning, reviewing her latest intelligence report about a rival family's internal conflict. I'm a survivor who learned to pay attention. This city is full of secrets, and secrets are currency. Simone smiled. Plus, nobody suspects the dancer. They think I'm just your girlfriend, eye candy with no real power. Meanwhile, I'm building a network they won't see coming until it's too late. Julian's captains had been skeptical at first. A woman, a civilian at their strategy meetings? But Simone had proven herself repeatedly, providing intelligence that saved operations, prevented ambushes, identified opportunities they'd have missed otherwise. Enzo had become her biggest champion. She sees patterns we miss, he'd told Julian privately. Thinks 3 moves ahead. It's like having a chess master on our side. Their personal life deepened alongside their professional partnership. Simone moved into Julian's penthouse, though she kept the safe house as backup old habits from years of running. They navigated his world together, attending functions where Julian introduced her not as his girlfriend, but as his partner. The whispers had started immediately. The Queen of Shadows, people called her. The woman who'd matched the butcher's darkness with her own. One evening, on their penthouse balcony overlooking Manhattan, Julian pulled out a small box. Not a ring. They'd discussed marriage and agreed it was too dangerous legally, too much documentation connecting them. Instead, the box contained a key. To my most secure safe, Julian explained. Contains emergency cash, documents, passwords to everything. If anything happens to me, This keeps you safe, keeps you powerful. Simone understood the significance. This wasn't a romantic gesture. This was ultimate trust. The kind measured in survival tools rather than jewelry. She handed him a USB drive. Encrypted file with all my Detroit contacts. If anything happens to me, these people will help you. They're loyal to me, but I've instructed them to protect you. They sealed the pact with a kiss, both understanding they'd just made each other emergency plans. Not traditional romance, but something deeper, partnership, built on mutual protection and absolute trust. But shadows gathered on the horizon. Simone received a call from one of her information sources, a bartender at an upscale club in Midtown. Overheard something you need to know. FBI agents discussing new approach to Moretti. Said since they can't touch him legally, and since Petrov failed, they're going after the girlfriend. Something about Detroit connections and a former murder investigation. Simone's blood went cold. Her past, carefully buried for 7 years, was surfacing. She called Julian immediately. We have a problem. They're digging into Detroit, into Marcus Webb, into me. Then we handle it, Julian said. Together. They spent the next week strategizing. The FBI couldn't be fought with violence or intimidation. This required different tactics, legal maneuvers, political pressure, strategic information management. Simone reached out to Kiana in Detroit. I need everything you have on Marcus Webb's death. Every police report, every witness statement, every piece of evidence. Can you get it? Why? Because the feds are reopening the case. And I need to control the narrative before they do. Kiana called back 3 hours later. I've got copies of everything. Sending them encrypted. But Simone, there are photos. Crime scene photos. They're brutal. I know. I lived it. The files arrived, and Simone reviewed them with Julian and Enzo. Crime scene photos showing Marcus Webb's body, the tire iron, blood spatter analysis. Witness statements describing Marcus's history of violence against women. Detective notes suggesting self-defense but lacking evidence to pursue charges. This is manageable, Julian said. Self-defense case from 7 years ago. No body now. Witnesses won't cooperate. Physical evidence degraded. Any prosecutor would struggle to build a case. Unless they're not building it for prosecution, Simone realized. Unless they're building it for leverage. Arrest me. Offer immunity if I testify against you. Classic Rico tactic, flip the loved one. Then we get ahead of it, Enzo suggested. Proactive approach. Contact the FBI ourselves. Offer cooperation on something else entirely. Make you an asset instead of a target. Simone shook her head. Or we do something smarter. We give them bigger fish. She pulled up files she'd been compiling information on a human trafficking operation running through New York ports. Not Julian's operation, but a rival organization that everyone in the underworld knew about but nobody touched because the people running it had political connections. I've got evidence of trafficking, money laundering, political corruption, everything the FBI dreams about. Major case potential, multiple arrests, great publicity. Simone looked at Julian. We give them this, anonymously. Let them build their case. And when they come sniffing around me, we point out that I'm the source who gave them their biggest trafficking bust in a decade. Hard to prosecute your star witness. That's brilliant, Enzo said. That's dangerous, Julian countered. You'd be putting yourself on the FBI's radar as an informant. That makes you a target for everyone. I'm already a target. This just changes which side I'm targeted from. Simone stood. We make me valuable to the feds as a source, not as leverage against you. They protect me because I'm useful, not because I'm cooperating against you. It took 2 days to compile everything. Then Simone sent the information anonymously to the FBI's Organized Crime Division. Within hours, task forces were being assembled. By the end of the week, federal agents were executing raids on the trafficking operation. The case made national news. 30 arrests, millions in assets seized, politicians implicated, and buried in the FBI's files was a note. Anonymous source, credible information, potential for future cooperation. 2 weeks later, FBI agent Leah Chen contacted Simone directly. They met at a coffee shop in neutral territory, public enough to be safe, private enough to talk. You know why I'm here, Chen said. Detroit. Marcus Webb. 7-year-old murder investigation. You're not going to run? I'm not going to run because it was self-defense. And because you know that. You've seen the files, the witness statements, Marcus's history. You know I killed him because he tried to rape me. Chen was quiet. Self-defense is a matter for courts, not FBI agents. Which is why you're not here to arrest me. You're here to recruit me. Simone leaned forward. The trafficking case, that was me. And I can give you more information on operations across the city. Intelligence on organizations you've been trying to penetrate for years. Not Moretti's organization, but others. Real criminals doing real harm. In exchange for what? In exchange for you recognizing that a 17-year-old girl who killed her rapist 7 years ago isn't your enemy. That going after me to get to Julian is wasting resources. That I'm more valuable as a source than as leverage. Chen studied her. You're trying to manipulate me. I'm trying to show you reality. You can spend years building a shaky self-defense case that might not survive a preliminary hearing, or you can work with someone who has access to information you need. And Moretti? I won't testify against him. Ever. That's non-negotiable. But I'll give you everything else. Other families, other operations, things that actually matter. Chen stood. I'll think about it. She left, and Simone waited. 2 weeks later, the Detroit murder investigation was quietly closed. Insufficient evidence, uncooperative witnesses, case deemed unpursuable. Chen called Simone directly. I need information on a fentanyl distribution network. Word is you might know something. Simone smiled. She'd won. Transformed from target to asset, from leverage to valuable resource. I might, she said. Let's talk. The final pieces fell into place. Enemies defeated, futures secured. Two people who should have destroyed each other instead built something unbreakable. A partnership that rewrote the rules. 6 months after their first meeting, Julian and Simone stood on the penthouse balcony watching Manhattan wake up. The city glittered below. 8 million lives interweaving in the morning light. I never thought I'd have this, Julian said quietly. Someone who knows everything and stays anyway. I never thought I'd stop running, Simone responded. But here I am, standing still for the first time in 7 years. They'd built something unprecedented. Julian's organization thrived under their combined leadership. His enforcement capabilities, married to her intelligence network, created a hybrid more powerful than either alone. Other families had learned not to test them. Petrov had retreated to Brighton Beach and stayed there, nursing his wounds in federal investigations. The FBI had become an unlikely ally. Simone fed them information regularly, always careful to protect Julian's interests, but providing enough intelligence to make herself valuable. Chen had become something almost like a friend, the kind built on mutual respect rather than trust. You saved my life, Chen had told Simone during their last meeting. That trafficking information led to our biggest case in 5 years. I got a promotion. You got protection. Everyone wins. Except the traffickers. Especially the traffickers. Simone's information empire had grown beyond even her expectations. She employed 20 people now, dancers, bartenders, servers, all feeding her intelligence. She sold information to Julian's organization, but also to hedge funds, insider trading tips, law firms' dirt on opposing counsel, and politicians' opposition research. All carefully legal, all plausibly deniable. She'd become wealthy in her own right, no longer dependent on Julian's money. Financial independence that meant she stayed by choice, not necessity. Julian's organization had evolved too. Simone had pushed him toward legitimate businesses, real estate development, import-export, construction. The smartest criminals eventually go legit. She'd argued, build something that outlasts you. Something your enemies can't take with a bullet or a badge. He'd resisted at first, but she'd been right. The legitimate businesses were profitable and provided cover for operations that remained criminal. More importantly, they created distance between Julian personally and the violence his organization required. You're making me respectable, he joked once. I'm making you immortal. Respectable is just the side effect. The final confrontation came not from enemies, but from family. Julian's distant cousin, a man who'd always resented Julian's control of the organization, made a play for power. Tried to convince captains that Julian had gone soft, that his relationship with Simone was weakness, that new leadership was needed. The captains brought the challenge to Julian directly. Antonio says you're distracted, Enzo reported. Says you put a woman above the organization. He's calling for a vote of no confidence. Julian's expression went cold. Call a meeting. Full council. Tomorrow night. The next evening, every captain assembled in the same restaurant where Julian had faced Petrov months before. Antonio sat at the far end of the table, confident, clearly expecting support. Julian stood. My cousin thinks I've gone soft. That Simone is a distraction. that my leadership has weakened. Anyone else share this opinion? Silence. Then one captain spoke, the oldest, most respected, not weak, different. You've brought an outsider into our organization. Given her power she hasn't earned through blood. Show them, Julian said to Simone. Simone opened her laptop and projected intelligence reports onto the wall. Every one of Antonio's secret meetings, his attempts to curry favor with rival families, his plans to take over by force if the vote failed, phone recordings of him promising Julian's territories to outside organizations in exchange for support. Your cousin isn't trying to strengthen this organization, Simone said calmly. He's trying to auction it off piece by piece. These recordings show him offering the dock operations to the Chinese, the gambling to the Russians, the protection rackets to the Irish. He planned to carve up everything Julian built and sell it to the highest bidders. Antonio's face went white. That's fabricated. It's documented. Simone interrupted. With timestamps, voice analysis, everything needed to prove authenticity. You didn't just betray Julian. You betrayed everyone in this room. The captains turned on Antonio with expressions promising violence. Wait, Julian said. He's family. I'll handle this personally. They left Antonio with Julian and Simone. The door locked behind the others. You set me up, Antonio said. No, Simone corrected. You set yourself up. I just documented it. You made the calls, scheduled the meetings, promised territories that weren't yours. I just collected evidence. What do you want? We want you gone, Julian said, permanently. Out of New York, out of the organization, out of my life. You leave tonight. You don't come back. And if I hear you're causing problems elsewhere, Simone's recordings go to everyone you promised territories to. Let them handle you. Antonio left within an hour. The captains, witnessing Simone's capabilities and loyalty, stopped questioning her place in the organization. She's not his weakness, one captain said afterward. She's his secret weapon. 3 months later, Simone enrolled in nursing school. Julian had delivered on his promise, a clean identity, solid enough to pass background checks, documented history that held up under scrutiny. She was officially Simone Carter, Detroit native, dancer turned healthcare worker, no connection to Tyra Simone Carter or Marcus Webb. She attended classes during the day, ran her information network in the evenings, and strategized with Julian at night. The balance was delicate, but sustainable. You're really doing this, Julian said, watching her study medical textbooks. I told you I want to build something beyond survival. Nursing is that. It's healing instead of hurting, creation instead of destruction. You'll make an incredible nurse. I'll make an incredible nurse who also runs an intelligence operation and helps her partner manage a criminal organization. Multitasking. They laughed, and in that laughter was everything they'd built: partnership, respect, love that survived in darkness because they'd both chosen to face it together. A year after their first meeting, Julian and Simone attended a charity gala in Manhattan. Legitimate public appearance. Julian's organization partially cleaned up. Simone accepted as his equal rather than his accessory. They danced together while Manhattan's elite watched and whispered. A year ago, I was alone in an empty penthouse, Julian said, convinced my reputation meant dying isolated. What changed? I met someone who didn't run from the monster. Someone who recognized me and decided fear wasn't a good enough reason to leave. I didn't leave because I recognized what you really are, Simone said. Not a monster, a survivor. Like me, so are we. They kissed on the dance floor, knowing they'd built something unprecedented. A partnership between two people society said couldn't exist. The feared crime boss and the woman who matched his darkness. Their legend grew. The butcher and his queen, together, unstoppable. And in the shadows of Manhattan, their enemies learned a lesson that would echo for years. Underestimate either one at your peril. Underestimate them together, and you've already lost. If you made it this far, you witnessed Julian and Simone's journey from isolation to unbreakable partnership. Two people who survived by becoming harder than their circumstances found each other and built something extraordinary. Their story proves that even in the darkest worlds, love survives when two people choose each other despite the cost. If you loved this story of power, survival, and partnership, please share it. Leave your thoughts. And remember, the most dangerous person in any room isn't the monster you fear. It's the partner standing beside them, equally powerful, equally unstoppable. Thank you for experiencing their story. The butcher found his queen, and together they rewrote every rule about what's possible when two survivors refuse to be alone anymore.